And particularly when you're tripping, it's a pretty amazing experience, climbing a fig tree up to the top and so on. So, I moved up here to be near rainforest. I'd been introduced to it at the Aquarius Festival, and like many others, I didn't want to go to the extremist Queensland, so this was a logical place to go. So when the blockade happened, I was running a general store at Kwongla, so I only got to come across occasionally to the blockade. But it was another life-changing moment that the people could stop forestry, stop the logging of this rainforest, that they were successful because there had been this long-running rainforest campaign that started with the border ranges before Terania Creek, and it wasn't really going far. They were going to put this little token reserve in the border ranges, snake-like park, where they're going to revoke a flora reserve, the Great East Creek Flora Reserve, log it, and then make it into a national park. And that was the mentality that the Rand government had at the time. And what Terania Creek did was put rainforests on the agenda. So it had this far broader effect than itself locally. And as a result of Terania Creek, we've got Barrington Tops, we've got the whole of the Border Ranges National Park, we've got most of Washpool, Werrikimbi, and a lot of other reserves created, about 120,000 hectares. I mean, and unlike some others, I think it was the predominantly peaceful nature of the action that won the day. It wasn't the spiking of the trees. That was an episode in it all. But I certainly believe in non-violent direct action. I think it's the only way to go. So Terania Creek inspired me. I got involved in the broader rainforest campaign and started trying to protect rainforests out further west on the Richmond Range and further west of there. But I didn't have the community support, me fighting a lone battle virtually. I tried to get other groups interested in Sydney and so on, and from around here. But the difference was there wasn't that community outrage, that people blockading, stepping up. So it took a long time. I mean, you have success that way, but it's not as successful as, say, like Terania Creek. Terania Creek made a huge difference to the environment movement generally because it's the first blockade in a Western democracy, and it ensued a lot of further actions in a similar vein, including places like the Franklin, the Daintree, and so on, and people from here went to those. In the late 80s, there was a whole lot of community groups throughout North East New South Wales who were concerned about old-growth forest logging. I was working on a place called Dome Mountain on the Richmond Range, 3,000 hectares of old-growth forest I was trying to protect. There was the Blackbutt Plateau crew who were trying to protect the Blackbutt Plateau. They had that community support. I didn't have it out west. And there was other groups throughout North East New South Wales. So we basically figured by working together, we could be far more effective and helping each other. So all these different groups would help each other, would come and support them, would fight the broader issue of protecting old growth. We also wanted to protect rainforests and threatened species and wilderness. They were our sort of agenda. And so the North East Forest Alliance was formed at the Big Scrub Environment Centre in Lismore in 1989 on World Environment Day. That was our first inaugural meeting. And by the end of 1989, we had a blockade at Washpool, North Washpool, an area of rainforest and eucalypt forest had been left out of the rainforest decision, which was made in 1982. It was left out, so we had a blockade there as they were pushing a logging road up onto it, and they went right through an Aboriginal site, a Bora ring, and the Aboriginal community came out and joined with us in the blockade. And because they hadn't consulted with the Aboriginal people like they were legally required to, that was stopped. So that blockade was effective in bringing out the local Aboriginal community and in stopping the logging of North Washpool in 1989. And then they protected 1,000 hectares in Aboriginal site, and then they started trying to log in another part of North Washpool. We had a blockade there in 1990, and we ended up taking to court. In 1990, we also had a blockade at Chalundi. I think there was 14 of us or something who were there. It wasn't many. But it raised attention to the issue. It was a vital part of raising that community awareness. And then we took it to court, and we won the court case. And and the government, because we had a whole lot of areas we were going to take them to court on, the government agreed to protect 180,000 hectares of old-growth forest. Then we had another blockade at Chalundi in 1991 that ended up getting the Endangered Fauna Protection Act enforced, and it also, through this complicated political process, it actually brought down, made Greiner resign after he was accused of being corrupt for trying to get Mesrel to vote for his forestry legislation. So, it had major ramifications, but it was that, digging in at Chalundi in 1991 where, most of the time we only had about 80 people there, but there was over a couple hundred people arrested overall. We held the road for 10 days with, pipes in the road, tripods, bipods, monopods, all sorts of defences, and we had 3 months to dig in before. But that is what got Chalundi as a major issue and got it on the agenda and led to all these other outcomes or helped facilitate them. It was an essential part of it. So NEFA then went on this sort of blockading run where we blockaded all over the place, different forests, mostly old growth, but other areas as well. In the end, we got Labor government to commit to protecting high conservation value old growth forests. Bob Carr, before he was elected in '95. Again, all these ramifications, but I believe the fundamental basis of them, like Terania Creek, was that blockading action. And I can't speak highly enough of the need for direct action. I think it's an essential component of whatever we do. I also will advocate for non-violent direct action because I think violence begets violence, and we would have been suffering, $100,000 fines and 10 years jail long ago if we had ever resorted to violence earlier on. To step forward a bit in time, I got involved again. I worked on forest full time for 10 years with the North East Forest Alliance, and then part time for quite a few years after, all voluntary, I'll point out. And then in 2009, I started. The forest stuff was very quiet. I started auditing forestry operations and finding all these breaches all over the place. And my biggest frustration was there wasn't that community action to support it. It would have been great if I went out there and found these breaches and then a whole group went and blockaded it, and then we would have had the outcome of proving they were logging illegally and all that sort of stuff. So I didn't have any of that support initially. It's sort of growing again now slowly, but that took. I'd go out once a year or twice a year and audit these operations, find these breaches, report them, and get bugger all outcome out of it, but a bit of publicity, which is a large part of what you're after. So here we are now in a situation where through publicity and through some action, not like it was at Terania Creek or Chalundi, we haven't got that sort of action again now, but we need it. We've managed to raise the forest issue and get it on the political agenda to the point where there's a strong support for stopping logging of public native forests. Across the community, it's sort of always been there to a significant degree, as shown by community attitude surveys, but now there's this strong political will outside the major parties. So we don't have the ALP on side. They're promised to protect the Great Quoin National Park, but they won't stop logging while they do their assessment of what they're going to include in the park. Their intent is just let business go on as normal. But thankfully, we have the Greens, who are now in this fantastic position of a balance of power, where the government needs their support for most of the legislation, and Sue's one of our greatest advocates for stopping logging of public native forests, but quite surprisingly, a lot of her independent colleagues are as well. you know, we have managed to get it there on the agenda. And you know, the back in initially it was rainforest, and it was old growth forest, and you know, we had a whole lot of demonstrations here in 1994 over wine. We tried to pick the rest of wine. We had blockades there, and in Nullum State Forest, and then that was all about endangered species, threatened species. We're finding all these threatened plants in the logging operations, and in 1995 we actually shut down the whole of the Moomba management area, blockaded every logging operation. The outcome of that was we just got them to agree to do pre-logging surveys for threatened plants and animals. You'd think it would be a no-brainer, but we had to blockade to get them to agree to that. Anyway, that, you know, I think the last blockade in Wine was in 1997, and they never logged it again since. It wasn't protected. We got some of it protected in 98, and we got the rest protected in 2003. But after 1997, that was the end of logging in the Mount Warningcood era, really. So the issue today is really koalas. You know, that's the one that's caught the public attention. It gets the interest of the community and of the politicians. So yes, they want to end logging of public native forests. Many of them do. Koalas is our key these days. So we've been through rainforest, old growth, threatened species generally, and now it's koalas is the icon, you know. So we have some really important koala habitat near here. You know, you go south of Casino in particular, because we've stopped all logging up around the Caldera now, so you've got to go out past Casino really to get to the logging areas, or south of Lismore, you've got Double Duke at the moment, where they're logging an area that they mapped as old growth in 1998. So it's only a relatively small area, but they're logging mapped areas of old growth, and they're logging an area that was identified as a fire refuge, which is by the EPA in 2020, where it didn't get badly burnt in the fires like all the surrounding country, and it's the sort of area that can repopulate those surrounding forests where a lot of the species have been decimated, really. You know, things like greater gliders getting burnt out of the trees, koalas, yellow-bellied gliders, a lot of these have been now listed as endangered. So Double Duke's a local issue, but you know, I'm fearful that they're almost through it all. There were actions to try to protect it, but nothing like Terania, and nothing like Chalundi, nothing like even Washpur. We need one of those big events to make a difference, and we just haven't had one in a long time. And so, you know, I think Double Dukes must be virtually finished by now. You know, a place that just should never have been logged. They've just started logging in a place called Braemar State Forest. That's just south of Casino on the Summerland Way, where we did pre-logging surveys in 2019, found all these koala scats everywhere, really important koala habitat. They're about to log it. We prepared for a demonstration, and I was hoping if we could build it enough, we could get back to that 100 people at a demo or something like that. But then the fires went through in 2019 and decimated the koala population. So we've had this so that stopped our blockade, because, you know, they just put off the logging. But they're back there now. They've just started again. They put their roads in. The koalas were, you know, one estimate is 50 to 70% of them were killed in the fires, but they're still there, and they can recover if we give them a chance, you know. And after all this effort to protect this area, I just find it so devastating that under this new government, like 4 days after the election, the forestry said they're going to log it. They prepared their plan, released their plan. They're trying to get in there before this government can get a shit together to try to do anything about it. But so that's on now. They're logging just further south there at Camira. They're still logging Double Duke, but, you know, as I said, I don't think there's much left there now. So we have an opportunity to stand up and make a difference, but we need a lot of people to do it. We can't just go on with, you know, a dozen people or so on. You know, the thing about Terania was that it had a long-term impact. It made them shit scared of us. The thing about Chalundi was that it had a long-term impact. It made them shit scared of us. We could hold the road for 10 days. We could get a couple hundred people arrested. You know, it scares them, you know, and we need to scare this government, the ALP, because they're not going to do it unless we fucking scare them, and that requires more than a dozen people going out there, and it requires digging in, you know, having a proper blockade, really trying to change things. And so I'm a full advocate of direct action. I think it's what's made the difference in the past, and I think we need to do it again. One last time for the public native forest. I think we're on the verge of stopping the logging of public native forest, but we need something like that to create the impetus to do it. Thank you.
I'm Paula Morrow. I was Paula Belmain back at the Aquarius Festival, and I'd come via overland and working for the BBC in London. I was at Gloucester Square for the first big Vietnam anti-rally. So I saw the students in Germany and Paris and London. It was just amazing. I came back and stayed in Yandina, in probably the first commune of the modern movement in Australia, for a year, and then Mullumbimby, Cooper's Lane, on Nicky and Jane Shan's lane. My 4-year-old son and I were living in a banana shed there when the call came out that there was going to be a big festival and they wanted people to help set it up. So I really saw how much, you know, the earliest settlers from around everywhere came and gave to the Aquarius Festival, but also how much we got out of it, how amazing it was, how far fucking out it was, as the whole movement was. I'm a writer. I just quickly wanted to show you what's come out of it for me. I got together with my second husband in a teepee at the Nimbin Festival, and we both got into natural therapy, went to Sydney and studied it, came back up here and lived over at Fernley near Tinton practiced in Lismore. And he died really young, 35, Bevan Morrow. I moved to Newcastle with the kids, and the first book I wrote, Life in Time's a novel, a utopian novel about how wonderful communal living is and all the new age ideas and meditation and how we're going to change the world. And then I wrote a healing book because that's what I was working at, herbalism and natural therapy. Then I wrote this, my most important book, probably Darwin's Dilemma, about my son Ben Morrow up the trees, including in Tasmania, you might know him. He died really young too, same thing, cancer. Our beautiful Ben, activist extraordinaire, one of the first sleeping up the trees in Tassie, but that's also got a fictional element about something Charles Darwin said and we didn't hear. And the last one's my memoir. Yeah, so a picture of me with the tiny child in Yandina, and then a picture of me in Anti Adani in Bowen in 2018, direct action. 10 of us were arrested. And I was a founding member of the Greens in Newcastle, so I've been arrested 6 times, 4 times against coal, and once for the trees in Newcastle, in Layman Street, and once to try and get better emissions when Kevin Rudd was going to Copenhagen. So totally, direct action. We have to remember Aquarius and keep together. Like we were holding hands then, we have to keep holding hands metaphorically to have strength to keep doing it. And yes, non-violently. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was beautiful. Sue Higginson is sitting right next to you, and Dailan mentioned about the political situation, and Sue is very much into the political situation. She was not only a forest activist, but she was actually a member of Parliament, and I'm very glad that you could be here. So would you like to take the microphone now?
Sure. Thanks, Ledge. So lovely everyone's here. I'm just going to quickly acknowledge that I'm on Widgeable Wireable land. We all are together, and it was just down the road where we formed the North East Forest Alliance, Bunjalung Alliance, many years ago, and to this day we will continue to work with First Nations people for justice, both alongside, in front when needed, and behind as we walk together. Direct action is just so important, and I know everyone here knows that. But we've got to remember where we are today, and we've just come out of 12 long, dark years of a New South Wales coalition government here in New South Wales. I say long and dark because that's frankly what it's been for the forests, for our rivers, for our communities, and for direct action. We saw in 2014 when the former Premier Mike Baird stood in Parliament House in one of those lovely dining rooms and gave an address to the Minerals Council and said, you'll get on with your work, extracting resources out of the ground, knocking down some of the last stands of endangered ecological communities, wiping out threatened species habitat while we mine coal, and gas. And what we'll do, if anyone gets in your way, don't worry, we're introducing these great anti-protest laws and we'll throw the book at them. He did that, and we have those laws today. And then we saw last year, since then there was a couple of other tranches of anti-protest laws as well. We saw them in Queensland, we saw them in Tassie. In Tassie they got very brave and they introduced some laws that were so draconian that Bob Brown took them to the High Court and the High Court read down those laws. In New South Wales here, given we are one of the better police states, they got those laws just right. So we've got these anti-protest draconian laws and they're actually lawful laws under the Constitution. So we have these laws, we have some more laws that they introduced around public lands and gatherings. We saw the increase of police powers when it came to our protest and the capacity for peaceful people to gather on public spaces in assembly protesting. And then last year we saw the absurd moral panic in the New South Wales Upper House when the Roads Minister Natalie Ward introduced those absurd responsive laws to the Blockade Australia and the Fireproof, the wonderful young people who decided that protest had to go straight to the heart of the cities. It couldn't be in the forests alone or on the rivers that we're destroying or at the coal mines where nobody could see us at that point in time. They went straight to the heart of the cities and started to obstruct our main roads, our ports, our rails, to try to ring the alarm bells about climate change and the very fact that the planet is on fire. And so she ran into Parliament House. She happened to be driving down the road that day, got obstructed in traffic, ran into Parliament and said, "This is outrageous, look at what's happening. These young people are stopping us from getting to work." Meanwhile, these, floods in Lismore, fires, etc. Anyhow, so we introduced a bunch of new laws saying if you blockade a road, a port, a rail line, etc., then you can go to jail for 2 years or you can be fined $22,000. So that's where we are, that's where our laws are. We've got extra police powers, we've got laws that prohibit people from stopping one lane of traffic for 20 minutes and then they can go to jail for 11 months. That said, we've managed to roll back these absurd penalties that have been issued in courts. The one thing that we have seen though is that people have carried on to protest in the forests and they haven't been subjected too much to these draconian laws. So the message today is, when it comes to direct action, one, we've got some serious, awful, draconian laws to unravel. And we've got a good government right now. I'm saying a good government, I'm giving them 9 months. We've got a new opportunity to unravel these really ridiculous, draconian anti-protest laws. The second message, though, is while we're doing that, it's okay to be out there protesting in the forest still, so the evidence suggests. In the last year, since those laws have been introduced, forest protesters are still only subjected to, mostly, the forest regulation charges. So where we are, so that's just a kind of quick thing on direct action. Just in terms of non-violent direct action, the first time I started engaging in direct action was when Dailan spoke about the 91 Chalundi blockades. It was really interesting because on the front line there, we had this massive discussion with the new NEFA kind of crew and the old Terrania crew. And we had this fantastic discussion about, well, what is non-violent direct action? Where is the line? Where do we draw this line? We're this new generation of forest blockaders. Where are we going to draw the line? We went and stole a bunch of concrete pipes from the Forestry Corporation. We dug them into the road and we were destroying the roads, and we were doing also, we, not me, you know, we, all the other people. And so there was all this nefarious activity taking place. And it was really interesting because some people rocked up and said, hey, is this non-violent when we're stealing property and we're digging roads and we're destroying property? Is this non-violent? And it was a really interesting discussion we all had. It all, you know, it happened anyway. But, you know, the definitions of what is non-violent was really at the forefront of discussions. We know now that in terms of the law, damage to property, it puts you in a whole category of offending, which is more inconvenient to the movement, to the individuals, to the lawyers that help. It's good to not be damaging property. But what we're seeing now, as you see, where people are sort of out the front of corporate offices of Woodside, of BHP, of Rio Tinto, it's like, well, what damage are we actually all talking about when we talk about damage? Anyway, suffice to know and remember that non-violence is our ultimate power. Wherever we are, whatever we're doing, the fact that we are non-violent is what makes us best. It's what makes us win, and it's what we have to do, no matter what the violence that's happening, that we're witnessing on the planet, to the resources that we're seeing, to that beautiful state of our planet that we are watching get destroyed. It's our non-violence that wins. Now, in terms of where we are with the forests and non-violent direct action, as Dailan said, we've got a new government and we've got a small part of the public forest estate that we only have a very small window left to go and save. We're talking about 1 million hectares across all of New South Wales. Yes, we've focused on the koala up here in the north, but down in the south and the southeast, the forests are absolutely screaming to stop the logging of them. They are decimated from the fires. We're on the edge of saying goodbye to those forests, these ancient public native forests, forever, or we've got this one political opportunity in the next 12 months to actually protect the rest of our public native forests. I say 12 months because we know after 12 years of coalition, we've got this new minority Labor government. We've got a bunch of independents and Greens who are controlling the balance of power in the New South Wales Parliament. Why am I talking about Parliament? Because the decision to protect our forests is political. It's going to happen in that Parliament, in those corridors. That's where the decision to protect our forests will be made. But that decision is influenced by what's happening in the forest, by the people protesting, by what's happening in the newspapers, by what's happening on the streets, and of course what's happening in the lobbies and the halls. It's also influenced by every single one of those MPs' email inboxes, their mail pigeonhole, their doors being knocked on and their phones being called right now. For 12 years, it's been a complete waste of time to contact your MPs. I know we've all been saying, do it, do it, do it, but I feel we've been saying it a little bit in vain because we know they didn't give a shit. Their agenda was to log the forest, to continue to log the forest until the forests are no longer the ancient forests we know, until they're plantations. And then it just becomes a resource for extraction. Right now, we've got a government that is influenced by the crossbench. They're listening. They've already made one decision to create the Great Koala National Park. We know they're going to carry on, they say they're going to carry on logging it, but we're not going to let them. There are people up and down the east coast of New South Wales right now mobilising, coming together. But up here, we need to do more, we need to do better. There's people in this room who have been doing a sterling job for the last 12 months, 18 months. They've been out here at Double Duke, they've been in Cherry Tree, but this is it. We all need to come together one last time for our public native forests. We're on the edge of winning. The independents who are in that parliament, I've met with all of them in the last couple of weeks. They have said to me, build the alliance, build the alliance quickly, and then we will get Labor to make the decision. We will do this together. Labor has to do this because they're in a minority. We know the ultimate goal is we end the logging of the public native forest estate, we protect these parts of the public estate, and then we get on with the real work of regenerating them, recovering them, protecting them from fire so that they can continue to be the lungs and the filter and the carbon saviours of all of us here in New South Wales, in Australia and across the planet. These forests are fundamental. There's a few of them left and they're all screaming for you right now, and we're going to do this together.
Done. Sue, I think it's very difficult act to follow that one, but I think we should get Sean, who's in the same sort of ballpark, and I think you can follow that a little bit, even though she's done wonderful.
Wait, one minute. I'm sort of thinking of an executive decision here because with absolute consensus. We've only got another half an hour in this session, but another hour before the next one starts, which is called the most important environmental issues of our times. So why don't we just combine that session with this session and we just keep going, and if anybody wants a coffee or anything, there's some out in the veranda. Come and go as you need to, and if that's agreeable with everyone, we'll just keep going.
All right, thank you. I feel a bit put on the spot trying to follow Sue Higginson, but thanks, Sue, for everything you're doing, and thank you to everybody here who's done so much over the decades. I think it's great that we get, that historical perspective on direct action, because people have been courageously and determinedly standing up to the evil of capitalism in our forests and against the gas fields, etc., etc. All the stories we've heard have been really inspiring. I've been really glad to hear them all. Thank you. My name's Sean O'Shannessy. If you don't know me, I work for the North East Forest Alliance. I got involved with NEFA back in the early 90s. NEFA came to Sydney and I was in Sydney and was able to help offer some support. I was briefly at Chalundi. I'd been involved with the South East Forests before that, in Coolangatta, Tanawangalo, the Dewar and various places where we went and blockaded to try to stop them from trashing those old growth forests down there with limited success. Thank you. It was, so it's been a long time. I've been at it a while. The last few years, as Sue said, have been a more intense sort of period of action for me personally, and as Dailan alluded to, we've been rebuilding the movement, which has sort of went to sleep for a while, for a decade or two, in fact. But, now is the time, as Sue has pointed out. It's lately been Double Duke, and Cherry Tree. These are the forests that we've been out there and blockading here locally, and not just blockading, but doing citizen science in, etc. So I think I wanted to start with the question that we're all being presented with: is direct action necessary? And I think that's a great Dorothy Dixer, whoever came up with that. Thank you, because it's not just necessary, is it? I mean, it's necessary in the sense that it's essential. It's not optional. It's required of us now if we are going to have a future for ourselves, for humanity. Let alone the koalas and the gliders and the quolls and the owls and all the other billions of creatures out there who all deserve to have a life of freedom and peace in their homes, which is those forests. If we are going to have those into the future, if our children and our grandchildren are going to be able to live in a world where they still exist, then it is essential. It is our duty. It is our responsibility to stand up now, make a commitment to standing up now, because we are at one of those focal points in history where we can achieve something momentous, something historic, something awesome can be done right now if we protect those native forests. That historic achievement we can claw back from the brink of oblivion. We are facing into the abyss. We all know this to be true. You all know what I mean. We are on the edge of the cliff and we have to make a decision about whether we drive ourselves over it or whether we pull back and we keep our, not just those endangered species, because you might not give a shit about koalas. Some people don't. You know, fair enough, whatever, you don't care about fluffy animals. That's up to you. It's actually us. We are on the brink of extinction, humanity. It's not just our civilization, which I often refer to. You might think civilization can go and get fucked. And, you know, like there's a strong argument for that. But without civilization, without the civilization we live in, our extinction at this stage is guaranteed. It is only the rule of law. It is only our capacity to go out and have non-violent direct action which protects us. And you know, so this is a moment where we have that opportunity. That opportunity will be gone from us because one of the things that will emerge out of the collapse of our civilization is a complete fascist state, where you will, like in many places around the world, unlike New South Wales, we would be shot for going out to do the things that we've been doing. You don't get shot in New South Wales. You get what's effectively a traffic offence if you go out there and commit an offence in the forest. And you don't even have to commit offences to be an effective action. That's the other thing I wanted to say about direct action and activism, is that a lot of people get the idea, when I speak to them about, oh, let's go out in the forest and do something, they say immediately, oh, but I don't want to be arrested. Oh, I'd love to go in the forest, but I don't want to be arrested. Because all they ever see on television from direct action activism is people being arrested. Because that's the newsworthy bit. That's the bit that makes it onto the telly. The hundreds of people who are not arrested, for every one person who is arrested, they are the essential players in that action. You cannot go out there and have it's very hard to have an effective direct action by yourself. You have to have dozens, if not hundreds of people backing you up. And everybody in this room, everyone has skills and talents and resources that they can effectively bring to bear to bring effective action. So I rather than saying, is direct action essential? I say effective action is essential. And not just essential, mandatory. If you care about your own survival and the survival of your children and your grandchildren and your mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and everybody else you know, literally right now, direct action is the way to go. Direct action through, we've talked about here today, various different forms. Media action is direct action. Creative, theatrical action, artistic action, personal community care action, supply of logistics, food, shelter, other types of things. These are all effective and important direct actions that you can contribute to the people out there in those forests, which are local to us now, less than an hour's drive away. Cherry Tree, Braemar and Double Duke are all there. So, is a direct action necessary? Well, I think I've made myself clear. Get out there and do it now. Bring everybody you know to the table. Make a commitment. That's what is required of us at this point in history. Or give ourselves up to leaping across into the abyss and failing as a species, as a civilization, as a community. That's our choice right now. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Just looking around, the demographic here from the age of replacement, what do you say to us geriatrics that may have not just the fear of risk, but the incapacity perhaps to really be up there? Because dare I say, if you read the room, how many young people here? That's all I have to say.
Your question being that we are all of an ageing demographic. I might be about the average age in the room right now, which is, and a man's got to know his limitations, as I learnt recently in Sydney when I put my hand up at the last minute and said, yes, I'd climb a tree. Well, in fact, not. As I did climb that tree back in 30 years ago, I said, yeah, I've done it before. Actually, when it came time to do it, I wasn't actually capable of doing it. So I understand what you're asking about. Everybody's capable of something nothing is my answer to that. You may not be capable of going out and running through the bush and hiding from angry loggers, but you are capable of committing to some action which you are capable of. That's all we can ever do. That's one of the rules of the campaign. I've been trying to recruit people into the campaign, and the fundamental rule that I have told everybody, it is ironclad, is you're not allowed to do what you can't do. That's forbidden. It is demanded of you that you do everything up to that point that you can do. Everything that you can do is what we're asking of people. And if everybody does what they can do, it's amazing what actually happens. Nobody is the hero of the day. Nobody is the We have heroes who sit in tree sits or on top of a tripod. They become our icons for the movement. They are heroic people who are doing the job. But everybody, it's more true to say, everybody is the hero. A lot of them are unsung, mostly unsung. So do whatever you can. Give money. Go online and do things be a collectivist, be a keyboard warrior. Talk to people in the street. Put up posters. Staff a stall in your local markets. Do whatever you can do. There are an endless list of things. I won't try to list it all off. We all know what those are amongst in this room. There's a huge amount of expertise on that. I'm not the leading expert. I'm sorry, there's somebody else with a hand up. Should I answer another question? We've got two more people with hands. Sorry.
Most of the younger people are working. In the old days, we were all on the land, and when we needed to mobilise, we were able to instantaneously because we had that freedom. Most of our younger people are locked into jobs to survive. So there is a reason why they're not here. But the other thing I wanted to kind of point out as well is that focus was very simple back in those times. They were on a particular place where we could gather in large numbers and we could get to know the area. We could find our way through that forest by the back of our hands. We knew where we were and we knew what we were doing. We're in a different dynamic now, and we need to somehow coordinate what we're doing according to the times that we're living in. And if we've got to get to places that we're not familiar with, how do we do that? How do we find our ways to these places? How do we get to know them so we can get in there and do what we're going to do and get out safely? These are the things that's all I want to say at the moment, is that we've got a different dynamic for direct action right now, and we need to collectivise in a way that we are working out the nuts and bolts of how we're doing this better.
Back from a few weeks in the Tarkine, and there are some wonderful people and youth, people climbing trees, blockading, but they all need camps. They don't want to have to come back and find that their camps need maintenance, that there isn't the dishes haven't been washed. They want to just come back to the camps and be able to just recoup. So there's lots and lots of jobs which aren't actually frontline jobs, but need to be done. Even digging shit trench. So there is something for everyone, no matter what age, truly.
True work. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, you've got the microphone, and there's somebody, since we're running the programs together, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that in 10 minutes we're going to start the sort of non-stop films, if anyone needs a break from discussions, across the road in the Birth and Beyond section, in Birth and Beyond room, next to the Nimbin Environment Center. So I just want to make that quick announcement. We've got a lot of people yet to hear from, and including Eddie Lloyd. I'd like to hear from him about what happens to you if you do get caught in the forest doing something naughty. And there's also Ian Lowe, who I'd like to know what he's got to say about our prospects, because he's a very good speaker. I saw him yesterday. Okay, so who's taking the microphone next? Eddie, after you? Okay.
Hello. Hello. Hello, everyone. Sophia Hoban, and I came up from Adelaide in 1980 to Niman, so I did miss the Terania Creek protest, but I caught the 1982 blockade at Mount Nardi. We formed the Niman Action Group, the Nightcap Action Group up there, and we all became naggers. And we nagged until the court finally, through the efforts of Miss Di Keevy and a few others that took it to the Land of Environment Court, we won the Nightcap National Park, 186,000 hectares, all told. It took 4 months in a muddy camp and getting arrested many times, but none of us really minded, because as one of us got arrested, the other one would replace them on the road. It was a completely successful, unified, beautiful action for 4 months, and we were all committed, very committed. They should have had us committed, actually. Since then, well, I had a long history in Canberra too, with political protests there against the bad boys. But my main, I feel 13 times I've been arrested in protests, and at 75, I feel like I've had enough. But I never, ever stop, and I will never stop trying to defend the forest. I mean, I wish I could have got to Double Duke, but I was ill at the time, so I didn't get there. But I just want to thank everyone for their actions in the past, the many times we faced umpteen police and umpteen bulldozers, and it was all very brave, and it was the best action I ever was involved in by a long shot. I'd like to bring up to date a little bit now. I recently got in touch with a group called My Place. Anyone heard of that? Yeah? My Place has set up groups all over Australia to counteract what's coming to us. Digital currency. Sorry? I don't understand, sorry. They're mostly about, so far, they grow food, and they come together and they swap food, because they know our food production is going to be in trouble in a not too distant future. We're going to have to grow more food, be more self-sufficient, be more community-minded, get together, and definitely direct action for any time the forest looks threatened. I'll still get there, even if it's on crutches. I just wanted to leave you with the aims and objectives. Oh, no, I can't. It's like I say, they are setting up groups all over Australia to try to counteract what the big boys have in store for us. I think you've all heard of the World Economic Forum. They are wanting to rule us, control us, get us to be obedient at all times, not mind that we won't have actual money, won't mind if we have our lands taken away, our houses taken away, our freedom taken away. So this is really the current issue, to bring it up to date. We need to become self-sufficient as a community. So thank you very much for listening to me, and bless you all for coming.
Hi. Sledge just said before, you know, what happens to you? Well, my name's Eddie Lloyd. I'm a lawyer, criminal lawyer, now heading into the environmental law field, representing a lot of people who are arrested in the forest, tree sitting or entering a state forest when it's closed, and also assisting NEFA in sending complaints to the EPA based on breaches identified by citizen scientists in our forests, and hoping to get logging stopped completely. So in regard to what will happen to you, ultimately, nothing bad, okay? That's the pretty general response. You'll probably end up with a no conviction, but the bigger question is, what happens if you don't? And we know if you don't take direct action, it's going to be complete chaos, climate collapse. The end of, you know, native forests will just be completely decimated. And when I look around the room today and see so many people who've got decades of experience, I feel a bit like an imposter, and I feel like, oh, what's Eddie doing here? What does she know? And I thought, me, like millions of other people that aren't in this room right now, that was me. I didn't understand. I walked through life, you know, pretty lost for a long, long time. I came into the law quite late in life after going down some pretty dark paths. I always had this, this connection to forests. I didn't get there very often because I was a city dweller, but in my darkest days, I remember thinking, I just want to be in a wooden shack in the west coast of Tasmania and be completely left alone. And I guess the attraction to the forest is what I'm finding more and more now, is that I'm finding it very, very healing for me, for my mental health. It's an incredible place, and that's why we really, really must do everything we can to protect it. So, you know, it's been a bit of a journey to get to this point, sitting here right now, talking to you as a lawyer. So I started off in the criminal law because I hit the criminal justice system myself on some drug charges about 20 years ago, and was introduced to this beautiful region when I went to the Buttery rehab. And I remember I moved back to Sydney after that, and I remember thinking about, you know, this area, and I lived in Lismore for a year of that, 3 years in Byron, and I just remember I missed the greenery. I missed driving on the road and seeing the greenery, which I now know was Lantana and Privet and whatnot, but, you know, it brought me back here. And I remember I was in the Labor Party, you know, in 2015, running in a seat in Sydney, and watching the 2015 election here and seeing the Bentley blockade and all you there, and it just captured me. And I just thought, I just want to be around that community. My mum died, a few things happened, I had a child, and I moved back to Lismore. It was the best thing that I ever did. And found here, you know, a new community and a family. And a few years ago, I started, you know, getting really into my hiking and visiting the native forests and getting to know the plant species and whatnot there. And, you know, for me, thanks to Sue, she's the one that's really spearheaded my journey into the environmental law now. And after a decade of, you know, representing criminals in, you know, they're in many, many courts for criminal charges, and now doing this forestry kind of work, I realised, you know, that my clients were not the criminals in my criminal law life at all. They were being persecuted by the real criminals, of course, many of our politicians that are making these laws that punish people for being disadvantaged, punish people for not having a house, punish people for having a substance use issue because they've got decades of trauma behind them. All of this was the result of inadequate government attention to those issues. And the real criminals, and I think that's why I love doing the forest work so much, environmental law is actually criminal law because the protocols that are supposed to protect the forests are, of course, so weak that it allows, the decimation of our native forest logging. So when I started going into the forest, particularly Double Duke, is when I really was taken, and this is, I guess, the message I want to leave with you today, and what I want everyone to talk to other people about is you don't understand the need to protect our forests unless you've been there. Really, we need people in the forests. This group of people, you've been doing this for decades, and me doing it now for the last few years, it's the same core group of people in the forest doing the same thing. And everyone else is supporting on their screen. They're liking, they're sharing, they're loving, they're cuddle emojis. It's just very, very frustrating. We've become so digitised, so disconnected to our ecology and our environment that people don't really understand what's at stake. And when I go into the forest and I breathe in the beauty and I want to learn more and I learn about the animals, and thanks to my sister-in-law Anastasia's taught me so much about ecology. I learn about the plants, I learn about the importance and the values and being there and breathing it and feeling how sacred and significant and special these forests are is what people need to do. But they also, equally as important, need to visit a killing field in our state forest and see the decimation by Forestry Corporation, okay, and to brush the fresh sawdust off that giant tree, to smell some kind of dead animal, maybe a squirrel glider in a hollow on the ground now. You need to see it, feel it, the beauty and the destruction, because then there's no turning back. Like, all I want to do is be in the forest. All I want to do is support people who are willing to take the risk, to take direct action and risk their liberty to do so. So we've got tree sitters, we've got wonderful people who are, who have got fines for entering a state forest. And, it's what is the big deal? In worst case scenario, what's the big deal in having a criminal record, a small fine and a conviction? When you're doing something so important, what is the big deal, really? And that's what we need to get other people to understand. Worst case scenario, you're entering a state forest when you shouldn't, you get a fine, okay? It doesn't go on your criminal record. If you want to take it to court, there are consequences to that. You then maybe end up with a conviction. Unlikely, very, very unlikely. If you want to get up a tree and do a tree sit, what's going to happen? Well, you'll get charged with a few offences, you'll get taken into custody for a few hours, you'll get police bail, you won't be able to go back to that state forest for a short period of time until your matters are over. Worst case scenario, if you've got no record or a little record, you're going to get no conviction recorded and you've done something bloody fucking incredible, okay? So yeah, you can be a criminal and then become a criminal lawyer like me. So, it's we've got to just make sure that we get the message out there, get everybody off their screens. And my ask today of everybody here, this core group of people that have been in the movement long before me, before I was born, and continue and have just been doing the hard yards for so long, it is time to get everyone else to support you in this fight. This is a huge fight. If we lose our forests, we lose our ecosystem, we lose our biodiversity, it will just be devastating and no one will really understand it, especially people in the city. That's why Sue's going to try and get MPs into the forest, to the killing fields as well, Sue, because you don't understand what you've lost until you go into those killing fields. Really, you really, really don't. So what I want everyone to be doing is when there is a call to action on the Save Banyava Koalas page or through NEFA, join NEFA so you get the newsletters and understand what's going on Facebook, wherever you see a call to action, I want everyone to fill up their car with people who've never been in the forest, children, family, and get them out there. Get them out there to breathe and feel and see the beauty and the destruction. That's my ask of everyone today. Nothing's going to happen if everyone just sits on Facebook and likes something. There are plenty of successes of Facebook campaigns and petitions that have led to great debates in Parliament, but this is not one of those campaigns. It requires people in the forest. It is a huge campaign. History has told us that only large social movements with mass populations collectively pushing the government to do what they should be doing is what is going to make the change. Politicians are going to tinker around the edges, except for Sue, of course, and some other amazing people. They're going to tinker around the edges. They're not going to do jack shit unless we make them. It's people power. We've got to power our democracy with us, with people, okay? So I want you to get motivated, get inspired, and get the message out to everybody out there. And when we do a call to action, please make sure that you are there with your car full of people and head into the forest to support.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Do you want to say next?
Sean, over here. I've got a question relevant to Eddie and Sue regarding, as you said, older generations being arrested, unable to climb trees, we've all got injuries. Police putting people in the back of utilities. I used to do registrations and whatever. You had to have a seat and a seat belt and being compliant. They've got a duty of care. And to put anyone in the back of a utility is not showing a duty of care. That should be blocked in the forest. If you want to take somebody back to a police station, a car, a seat belt. And we've seen injuries from that happening. I'd like to hear comment from both our legal people. That is illegal. They're getting away with it. They should never be allowed to put a person with an injury into a vehicle in that situation. So what's your opinion on that one?
Yeah, I'm well aware of that happening to not just people in forests, but many of my clients who are treated poorly by police officers. I guess I can't stop that happening. I'm not there. But what everyone must do, and I should have mentioned this, in the forest, wherever you are, at an action, in a protest, and you come near police or forestry corporation, you must film every single thing. Now, if you're getting arrested and you're going to get rammed into the back of a paddy wagon, you need to make the police aware. You speak to them, you say, turn your body-worn camera on, please, and you let them know your fears. I'm concerned that I am not going to be safe in the back of the paddy wagon because I have got an injury or because I'm elderly or because I'm just scared because you haven't, I'm not going to be secure and safe in there because the road's rough. You articulate it. And if anything does happen, then at least that will be captured on their body-worn video. And if there are other people filming, that is also very helpful. And that is great evidence to, if action needs to be taken, i.e. suing police or forestry court for that. And the other thing as well is when people are sitting in trees, what we've been seeing is forestry corporation officers who are very, very aggressive and very, very nasty, for lack of a better word, threatening our tree sitters, before the police come, turning their chainsaws on, vroom, 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 you know, threatening and telling them they're going to chop them down, and it's just, you know, so that's another reason why. And our tree sitters have been fantastic. Every single thing is being filmed. That's the only protection. And police complaints and complaints to Forestry Court will be made if anyone is treated badly or injured in any of their interactions.
We have protections around us, like Eddie's saying. You have police liaison people, you talk to the police, but we deal with the police in the after event. Remember, the focus is to protect the forest. We're out there blockading to win for the forest. And yes, we all take all the steps we can as groups working together to protect each other from the police. But the police is not this issue. The police is separate, and we should never conflate them. But we take it on as we go. There are seriously good lawyers all across New South Wales who actually are working for us all the time. We have civil lawyers down in Sydney who will take on bad police cases. They love it. They eat the police for breakfast every morning on Pitt Street. But the main thing is we do everything we can on the front lines to protect the elderly, the frail and the vulnerable like we do wherever we are in communities. As Eddie said, the best protection you have for safety is a video, and it's about having buddies and good systems for police liaison. But we know how to do that because we've been doing it since '79 and we've been building this. We know how to do that. Never let one bad cop get in the way of a movement saving the forest and the planet. That's what we have to do.
Hi, I've just got something I wanted to add to what Eddie was saying. My name's Kaz, and if you see that black dog, her name's Bunyip. Just with the dams and how we, with Paul's help, we helped to stop the Beryl Creek Dam. All the letters and stuff that are in newspapers about, oh, we should be building the dams because, you know, we need water, blah, blah, blah. It's all the people on the coast saying that, and they've never been into, they don't know where Beryl Creek is. They've never been there. They don't know how beautiful it is. They don't know how beautiful the forests are. They're just using the forests and the rivers as a resource for their greedy, selfish lives on the coast. You know, they don't even know. So yeah, if you can get people out there, like Eddie was saying, that I was just adding on to that, because we're just being used as a resource for the coastal people.
I've been given the privilege of talking a little bit. I'm not of the Aquarius first generation. I admire it, it's pioneers, but there's some lessons maybe from Victoria that we've learned. I'm 75 and I plodded into the forest with young activists. We got a funeral march of 100 people over the mountain ash. We battled to get more than 100 people. Without 100 people, we couldn't do it. So we have started to have to use very clever techniques. They're not getting oldies like us scrambling through blackberries and up trees, which I experienced 2 or 3 years ago. They're using drones. We're documenting where trees have not revived. We've mapped the whole of Victoria. This is going to come out in the ABC very soon, where forestry claims it has planted trees, and after 10, 20 years, the trees in those forests have not grown. We have a complete map of all the coops of Victoria with drones, with digital technology experts, young people doing very clever stuff. More on that later. There's loads. I mentioned yesterday at the Bush Theatre, sorry for that disaster, but the film will be shown again for those who want to see it. We saw it in the end. For those who persisted, but those who didn't, you can see it again. We'll give you a date. But the technique that's now being used in Victoria, and we have stopped the logging. this year is walking into the forest and monitoring every, for example, koala in every tree. We digitise it. We have a camera, we photograph it. We have to know where we're standing with Garmin, with Gaia. It's very clever stuff. You're carrying about 4 different types of equipment. And that's not for us 75-year-olds, honestly. It's for the young, and we need to recruit the young. And I suggest that we all get busy trying to find young people, or we bring up some of these young people from Victoria because they're succeeding. So there's a complete network of all of us now in Victoria. So there's Jill Redwood, who's a hero in Gippsland, Gecko. We all learnt from you, but now we're moving on. You know how one has to move on. You know, they say about institutions, build them up and burn them down. You have to start afresh and anew. So we tried the activism. We tried it up to COVID. We were doing it for 20, 30 years. We've got to do we've got the Environmental Defenders Office. They are our heroes. We have pro bono lawyers, Jonathan Corman and others. They defend us, and the main thing is that we scientifically spot what we're trying to protect, because the animals have protection, lizards and whatever it is doesn't, but the greater glider. So we walk at night looking up at the trees. You get a stiff neck, you shine, and you see the trees in a more beautiful way than ever before. At night, these white, amazing branches of the sparkling stars, we have to spot the red lights, the red eyes, not the stars, and that's the trick. And so we spot these gliders in the tree, and there's thrill and joy. And then the person carrying the cameras has to photograph it moving. Its tail it's the biggest glider in the world. And then we also have to spot Leadbeater's possum, which is endangered, and they give us many meters. The many meters from wherever we spot that animal is protected, and that's how they've been protecting the forest, by getting into the weak system. And that means not us. We have to get these tech-savvy people, and I suggest one way to do it would be to bring them up here. There's one person, Trent Patton, who set up Wildlife of the Central Highlands. It's an acronym called WATCH, W-O-T-C-H. It has won many court cases and saved 6,000 or more hectares of land, probably more. So if you look on the Aquarius website, we're also protecting farmland. We started to give up on the state, and we started to turn farmland into forest. And that's on your Aquarius website, the Wilderlands and the Cathedral Wildlife. That's people getting together, pooling their resources, buying land, turning it into forest, adjoining state parks, adjoining national parks. That's a big movement now starting in Victoria. So I don't want to dominate, but I just wanted to give you an idea that if we brought up someone like Sue McKinnon from Kinglake Friends of the Forest, Jill Redwood, Trent Patton, they can give you, they're the heroes. I'm not. I've just been joining in and learning. And there's Warburton Forest, and now they've made an alliance of all of us. So we all Zoom and link together. And we've got young people, Friends of the Earth, who often coordinate and run it. And they're 20 to 35-year-olds. And of course, the lawyers are critical. Without the lawyers, we would be getting nowhere. So that's why I just wanted to suggest to you that we oldies don't have to scramble through the forest. We need these young people, and I don't know where you find them here in Nimbin. Maybe drugged out of their mind, I don't know. But my friends also have magic mushrooms, and they're still able to do this stuff, and they still, you don't know if it's a she or a he either. But they're into it, and they're saving the forest.
My daughter, born in Nimbin, is currently in Victoria doing all of these watch things. just so you know. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it's worth us pooling some funds and bringing Trent Patton up here. He'll show you a film of everything that's been done. And then we attract young people. We bring Sue McKinnon, who's a leader, and there are others, many others there. But we bring them here and they present to you what they've done there, because we're really succeeding. I mean, I have a friend by the logging truck road, and he said, you'll fail, you'll fail. He's our age. The logging trucks have stopped. He can sleep at last. And he is a family of loggers. He hated the business. Okay, thanks. Thanks for allowing me to talk.
My experience, I mean, I'm really, it's fantastic hearing these stories and people talk about how they have the different ways that they contribute to forestry campaigns in particular. I'd like to address this issue: is direct action always necessary? Which was the original question. And I think people have different ideas of what direct action is, you know, because the way I think about it, basically when you're running a campaign, there's about 6 strategies that you're running. You know, you're running political strategy, media strategy, often a corporate strategy, legal, and a community, like get the community involved strategy. And then there is direct action, which can be anything from like a fantastic stunt that gets attention, or civil disobedience in the tradition of Martin Luther King and Gandhi, you know. So I don't think that direct action is always necessary in a campaign. That's probably going to be heresy in this room, but it is particularly U-Butte for forestry campaigns. And just, you know, obviously there's just absolutely massive success using civil disobedience with forestry campaigns. But I can think my involvement, like my first involvement with non-violent direct action was I was involved in the anti-nuclear movement in South Australia and Greenham Common. First got interested in, you know, reading about non-violence and how it works and all this kind of stuff. And then later was involved with the 5-year campaign for gas-oil-free Northern Rivers. And one of the interesting things was, like when I first jumped into the gas-oil-free campaign here, I was talking with Simon Clough and some other people, and I said, I think I've got to get involved. And I had this idea that we should just have a pledge to defend the Northern Rivers with civil disobedience. You know, and we got a bunch of people together, Aidan Ricketts and Ian Gaillard was there, and I sort of pitched this idea, and they said, Annie, I think you need some middle bits, you know, to get people involved. So I went back and I thought, okay, well, and they suggested some middle bits. People can make a pledge, you know, to inform other people, to give money, blah, 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 put lock the gate sign on your property. And I thought, oh, what if we had a strategy where you work with your neighbours to declare your district gas fuel free? You know, and from this came this idea, and we developed it in this region, and we ended up with 147 communities that had done this thorough grassroots democracy process, you know, visited every household in their district. Nimbin did a bloody huge one. God, it was huge, the one you did here. And then unilaterally declared themselves gas fuel free. And I remember when we did a video to launch the thing on the Shannon Oval, and it was a beautiful video that Brendan Shoebridge did, a YouTube. And I remember someone got into the YouTube in the comments afterwards. They said, "This isn't any good, you know. Get real. This isn't direct action. You know, you're just pissing around with this stuff," this guy said. I'm assuming it was a guy. There was something about the tone that was kind of a bit like mansplaining. But anyway, yeah, so it was really interesting. And you know, we were simultaneously in that little group, we were planning civil disobedience. You know, we were thinking we're going to probably have to do civil disobedience here. And so Simon Clough and Aidan Ricketts were going around to all these little community halls doing training in civil disobedience, non-violent direct action, whilst we were doing this big thing of basically mobilising the population. So this goes to the question of, like Graham was talking about, it was great hearing his story about, you know, using the Channon market as the attractor. But we have to think of ways to mobilise the community to engage them in what we're doing. And there were 5 blockades with the Gaswell-Free Northern Rivers campaign of different sizes. And gradually we grew acceptance of the civil disobedience action. And I can remember coming back in a plane to Lismore because I was working with other communities to help them get their campaigns going in other states. And I was sat next to this woman who said, you know, what do you do? Oh, I'm a bank manager. You know, what do you do? Well, I'm just working with Lock the Gate at the moment. And she said, oh, okay. Yes, I see you've taken the kids to Bentley on the weekend, you know. And I thought, yes, you know, like we have absolutely normalised civil disobedience action in the community. And so I think, so getting back to that question, is direct action, meaning civil disobedience, always necessary? It is absolutely UBUT and fabulous with forestry campaigns, obviously, and other campaigns as well. But I can think of about, probably about 9 campaigns that I was involved in for gas-free or coal-free campaigns that did not involve civil disobedience at all. And the other thing I'd like to say is... No, I'm not saying that Bentley wasn't. I'm talking about Kingaroy, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania. These are all campaigns that were won without civil disobedience. Yeah. Yeah.
Was Bentley not so big and so grand and so good, as everyone knows, that it was a legacy, the same as Terrania was, for all of those other... It was in New South Wales, but I can tell you that in Swan Valley and Kingaroy and Wide Bay Burnett and the Limestone Coast and Tasmania, it had zero recognition. Yeah. And so it was hugely important in New South Wales with the extension of Gaswell-Free right down the Central Coast, like massively important. And did have a huge echo. But what I'm trying to say is that there are some types of campaigns that can be won with a different mix of those strategies. And so I think what's important is, you know, like and to get back to the need to have action groups that are long, you know, I just applaud all of you who've been involved in NEFA, you know, the Nimbin Environment Centre group, all of these groups who have kept going and going and going, because I think it's in these groups that that collective intelligence comes to play, where we can figure out, okay, now it's time to ramp up some corporate strategy, or now it's time to ramp up the political strategy in a particular way, or to bring in a legal strategy. And so I am not downplaying direct action. I thought that we were going to have to do civil disobedience in the Northern Rivers from the word go. And I think it was absolutely incredible what happened here. And I think it's also important to remember that the campaign didn't end with Bentley. Bentley didn't get rid of one of the 14 gas licences in the region. That they were only gotten rid of after the 2015 election, when the National Party, which had hold massive majorities in our region from time way back, got smashed or got knocked around in that election. And it was only after that time that they bought back all of those 14 licences. That was the only moment that we got liberated. So that's why
I think, you know, just coming back to Northern Rivers Guardians, you know, NEFA, all of these groups that just keep working together is where this kind of collective intelligence can come into play to win these different campaigns. Yep.
Just a quick question. You didn't say how those campaigns were won without direct action. Do you want to just quickly say what the forces were that got them over the line?
Okay. So
can I just interrupt for 1 minute? Because at 12:30 on that clock, they're going to start a movie about Bentley. So it might answer some of these questions. It's called The Bentley Effect, and it was made by Brendan Shoebridge and his team, and they did a fantastic job. If you haven't seen it, get across and see it. And we've just done a little executive decision. We will have a break. We'll finish this discussion. We definitely want to hear from Susie before we go on. And when we come back at what time? 1:45, short break. We will go on to how we're going to go on with current issues. So we will go on to the next question, because this one looks like it's almost run its course. But yeah, Annie, I want you to finish.
Yeah.
When you're finished, we'll go to Susie, okay?
Okay. Good question. How were those campaigns won without civil disobedience? They certainly had direct action in them. You know, like they had some fantastic direct action, like primarily with community strategy, political strategy, media, sometimes legal strategy, but mostly it was a combination of those. So those were communities doing the gas oil free or the coal free community to engage everybody in a unilateral decision to declare ourselves gas oil free or coal free. So that's kind of an act of civil disobedience, because the law gives you no power to do that. So in doing that, communities are just declaring ourselves, you know, unilaterally declaring themselves. But there was in Swan Valley, which was probably about an 8-week campaign to get the WA government to take that off, you know, remove the licence from it. That was really some very quick community strategy in the midst of an election campaign with media and political advocacy, you know, and that got that over the line. So different combinations in each instance. And I should also say that, and this is really worth noting, is that all of those campaigns, most of the people that we were working with were National Party and Liberal Party aligned people. So most of the activists were Liberal Party, National Party aligned people in all of those instances. So, you know, it's got a very different kind of way of going. Yeah.
No. It's working? No. Yeah. Hi there, my name's Michelle. I live in the area and I'm a rainforest seed collector, and I've been doing that just for about 4 years. And I also do tree identification and GPS mapping. I believe that the biggest environmental issue today is the disconnect, the human nature split. And I think that anything that we can do to help people to fall back in love with themselves and the planet, how do we build those bridges? How do we heal the human nature split so that we're all nature? And so everybody's got different bridges that they can build. And I have my own bridge, which I've kind of built, which is using screens, using technology to bring adults and children out into nature to look for trees, to look for seeds, just like they would in a video game, or just like they do on Facebook, trying to get a dopamine hit from finding something that's fun, you know. And yeah, and then maybe hoping that when they're out there, they kind of like might spend a bit of time looking around and have a bit of an aha moment, you know. And so when I get a bit lost about whether that's, am I doing the right thing or not, am I taking enough direct action or not, in between the direct actions, I kind of think, no, you know, being an everyday activist is really important, you know. From the moment I wake up, conversations I have with people over coffee, or little conversations I have with my mum, or little interactions I have with people on the street, they all count, the whole thing. And the more I evolve my life into that, the kind of better I feel. And the better I feel, the more people want to kind of do what I'm doing. They're kind of like, oh, you look great. What are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just like doing all this environmental work. It's amazing, you know. You just feel really, it's not even work. I call it plurk, you know, plurking. It's playing and working all the time, 24 hours a day, you know, like. And so it's just kind of, people will join if they can see that it's fun, you're feeling, it gives you freedom, you feel you're good at something, you're using your skill set, you have a sense of belonging, and your basic needs are being met, as in you're getting paid to do it as well. So I just feel like when I lose my way, I just go back into the forest and I sit there for a really long time. And then I always get a good idea. And then I come back out and I just go about that everyday activism in the same way I was doing before. So yeah, trying to create bridges for people in the way that feels right is kind of what I'm trying to inspire other people to do and trying to do myself. Yeah.
I'm actually going to pass until the next session, but I will hand over the microphone to you, Ian, if you come into the circle. Quickly. You want to go? You've been waving your hand around. There you go.
Is this on? Yep.
Just two little stories. I'm a Victorian too. I've got two little stories. One of them is about an organisation called the Field Naturalists Club of Victoria, which was the Field Naturalists Club of Victoria. They were founded about 130 years ago, and they were a group of people who liked going out into the bush, and they went into the forests in those times and they advocated for their preservation. So places like Wilson's Promontory National Park and Wyperfell National Park, which were some of the first national parks in Victoria, were established because of the activism of these people. They were influential because a lot of them lived in the city, they were accountants and lawyers, etc., and they knew people in government and could influence them. The second story is about a guy called David Cameron, who was a botanist, a professional botanist. He was an activist in zero population growth. And he spent almost his entire career working for the Department of Conservation in Victoria. He did most of the exploratory work that identified all the little rainforest patches throughout the whole state. So he meticulously worked through Gippsland and found these patches of forest and mapped them. And this is before, you might say, before there was an environmental movement focused on those things. The Native Forest Action Council existed, I was involved in that, but this is not sort of direct action. This is a man who worked within the system, pursuing his passionate desire to conserve rainforests. He worked within the system. That's what seems to be lacking in this whole discussion. There's no talk about recapturing capturing the institutions is one way to achieve change. Is one way to achieve change without direct action. The Field Naturalist Club went into Erranundra Forest before anyone had contemplated sitting in a tree there. We set up pitfall traps, we set up cage traps, we had bat harp trapping. We found some organisms there that were important. We explored it, we reported on it, we fed that into government, when we obtain some influence, that what you'd have to say is not the sort of direct action that you have been discussing.
Thank you. Susie, you said you're going to go on the next session. Okay, good. It gives us a chance to have a little break, and because there's always a lot more to say, I know, but we have to call it now, and we're going to have another session starting in 10 minutes, all right? 10, 15 minutes.
And that session is called What are the greatest environment issues of today? And Professor Ian Lowe is here, and he was a keynote speaker in that session, so I'd love you to stay. So just have a little break and then reconvene.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We're just getting ready for our next session. We're going to have, our panel will be here because we've got some of the most amazing panellists to talk to you about what are the greatest environmental issues right now, of which most of you know. Sue, fabulous. And then we're going to have this amazing Q&A and a bit more of an open circle. But following on from Neil Pike this morning, what did he say? I fucking hate circles or something. But anyway, we're not, he was very rude, really. Eddie. We've got a lovely large panel. Eddie, you're on the panel. Okay. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. We're just, because we've got this incredible panel of incredible experts and activists and people who have come from far and wide to this incredible festival and this wonderful place with everyone together. So we've got this panel, and then we're going to open up to a Q&A and a active dialogue. How does that sound? Is everybody happy with that? Yeah? Yes. First is Fantuzzi. You're okay. I was just doing that initial organising. Now.
Oh, that's good. No, we're happy with that.
What do we do now?
Okay. Okay. They're asking me to step into the middle, and I'm nervous, as you can see. And I've never been in the center, but I'm a New York, Puerto Rican who's traveled the world and got really lucky to wake up back in the 60s and be a part of the anti-war movement, the peace movement, the environmental movement. And I have a little something to say just before I do this song that I was asked to do. And that is that my children are in their 40s now. And my children are doing not only what I did, but 10 times better, if not 20 times better. And so there is hope. I know I'm not alone. Some of you have made some amazing children too. And they take what we've got and they take it to the next level. So, you know, I'm looking for a nice wave to take to the next world. And I know I'm going to leave this one in the hands of some good folks. I'm learning a lot over here. This is amazing, you know. And one of the greatest things is being amongst people who are my age, which I don't get to do being an artist, because most of us don't get up and go to the concerts and etc. or go to the forest to fight the good fight or to the streets. I certainly don't, but I do it in the festivals, and thank you for having me. What song was it that you asked me to sing? No, but you had one in mind. May the circle, oh, we're back to the circle. May the circle be unbroken, she asked me. But, you know, while I'm sitting here, I'm hearing this great song that I wrote called Save the Earth. So I want to do a real quick, May the circle and Save the Earth, if you don't mind. Is that okay? Okay. May the circle, help me out, be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by. Circle. There is, or a good one waiting, inside, Lord, deep inside. One more time, louder. There's a better world awaiting. Deep inside, Lord, in the sky. All right, so here's another one I did. And this one is a finger-snapping one. How cool is that? Ready? All of hell is breaking loose. But if we choose to see the light, human species is in danger. To save it is our plight. Water is life, can't be polluted. They're essential to all living things. A sun through holes in our ozone layers. Hey, someone's got to do something. And if you can walk, you can dance. And if you can talk, you can sing. So let's all join together, save the earth. Save the earth. Woo! We're dance and sing. That's right. Save the earth. Save the earth. Oh, dance and sing. Let's look at the bigger picture and conserve our energy. And for every living creature, there'll be peace and joy, plenty. We didn't inherit this earth from our forefathers, no. We're borrowing it from our children. And unless we turn this thing around, hey, there won't be a place for them to live in. So, save the earth. Save the earth. Woo! We're dance and sing. Save the earth. Dance and sing. Save the earth. 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 Thank you, thank you, thank you. I got the mic right here.
He's got the microphone. Yeah. Here, Ian's first. Is that on? Yeah, it is.
Ian's first. Ian's first.
Ian's first. We're here at Ian. Professor Ian Lowe. Needs no introduction.
Thank you very much. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're on, recognise that sovereignty was never ceded, that their land was taken by a process that can only be described as robbery with violence, and recognise their elders, past, present and emerging. Recognising elders isn't an integral part of whitefella tradition, but I have to say the idea appeals to me as I totter unsteadily into that category myself. I said yesterday in the Bush Theatre that recognising the original owners has become a bit of a ritual, and even coalition politicians now usually remember to recognise the traditional owners. But it should be much more than a ritual, because the original Australians worked out over tens of thousands of years how to live within the limits of this harsh and unforgiving continent. And they embodied those knowings not just in custom and practice, not just in ceremony and song and dance, but in their system of laws, the system of laws that allowed them to live sustainably. And I'd suggest that that's a lesson we whitefellas have to learn if we intend to be permanent inhabitants of this planet rather than temporary visitors with a mission to loot, rape and pillage. Before getting to the subject of this panel, I'd like to make a few linking comments, picking up what was said in the last session for those who were there. Picking up on Ellie's point about reminding the decision makers of the importance of what's lost. You go a long way and have to look very hard to find a more pragmatic and unprincipled politician than Graham Richardson. But Graham Richardson, having been taken to the forests of southwest Tasmania by activists, recognised their importance. And Richo used his thuggery and political bastardry to be a very effective environment minister because he recognised the significance. So you should never discount the importance, of showing even the most apparently unprincipled and pragmatic politician the significance of the natural systems that we're in danger of losing. The second point, picking up on what was said about direct action, is that direct action sometimes can and does change what's happening. It stops destruction. But at least as often, what direct action is about is changing the discourse, changing the dialogue, changing the political mood. Bob Brown made the point in the film last night, for those who persevered and saw it, that people paddling up the Gordon River below Franklin were under no illusion that paddling a kayak up the river would stop a dam being built. But what it did was alert mainland Australia, voters in swinging electorates in Australia, to what was going on, what was likely to be lost, which in turn led to Bob Hawke saying the dam will not be built, and the rest is history. I was part of a direct action to save the Mary River from the Traveston Crossing Dam, and you'd go a long way to find a less expert kayaker than me, and I was a bit alarmed to find I was in a kayak with Bob Brown, and that an Australian environmental icon was at real risk of being lost at sea because of his inexpert co-pilot. But again, we weren't trying to stop the dam being built. We were trying to get the proposed dam on the political agenda. And the result was when Peter Garrett used the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, the Toothless Act of the Howard government, which had never been used by any environment minister to stop a proposal that had been approved at the state level. When Peter Garrett intervened to stop the Traveston Crossing Dam on the grounds of it threatening the habitat of endangered species like the Mary River turtle, Anna Bligh, as Premier, was very happy to see it taken off the political agenda. She didn't object in any way. I think she was actually relieved. The Traveston Crossing Dam was proposed by Peter Beattie when there was a water crisis in southeast Queensland, when the Wivenhoe Dam was down to 15% of capacity, and it was thought that we needed more storage. And just to show that a pragmatic politician like Peter Beattie can be influenced, the direct action in Queensland to save rainforest hadn't stopped logging. Rainforests were still being logged, wet temperate forests were still being logged, dry sclerophyll forests were still being logged. When John Howard put forward that piece of political bullshit called the Regional Forest Agreements, which in most states was a licence to hack the bejesus out of the forests, Peter Beattie saw it as a political opportunity, and he brought together in one room the conservationists, the Rainforest Conservation Society, Queensland Conservation Council, the timber industry, the unions representing workers in the timber industry, and the bureaucrats who regulated the industry, and said basically, you lot have to work together and come up with an agreement that you all can live with. And the agreement that came out of it was an agreement to phase out the logging of native forests over 5 years in return for the state government investing in expanding the plantation estate so that the timber that was needed for buildings, houses, would still be provided, the jobs in the timber industry would still be there, but the native forest would be protected. And that happened because the direct action in the forests had created a political mood in which a pragmatic politician wanted to end the forest logging, but also wanted to keep jobs and not have the odium of wiping out a profitable industry that employed lots of people. So you should never discount the importance of direct action, even when you don't have a snowball in hell's chance of stopping the project directly. What you can do is change the political mood, because in the final analysis, as Sue pointed out, it's the politicians who will make the decision, and they'll make the decision, basically the only thing they fundamentally care about is getting re-elected. They will make the decision they think will increase the probability of them getting re-elected. What this session is about is what are the most important environmental issues. Nearly 30 years ago, I was involved in the preparation of the first independent national report on the state of the environment. And in that we said that Australia has a beautiful and unique environment. Much of it is in good condition by international standards, but we have some serious problems that we need to address if we're to achieve our stated goal of living sustainably. And some of the people in the room who are younger than me might need to be reminded that in 1992, more than 30 years ago, COAG, the Council of Australian Governments, solemnly adopted a national strategy for ecologically sustainable development. So in principle, the Commonwealth and all state and territory governments are committed to, and I quote, a pattern of development that does not reduce opportunities for future generations, a pattern of development that recognises and preserves the integrity of natural systems, protects our unique biodiversity, recognises our global responsibilities. I think it would take a very generous assessor to detect any sign that recent governments even know there is a national strategy for sustainable development, let alone see it as the guardrails within which we need to develop. But we said in that report the 5 environmental issues that need to be addressed if we're going to achieve that goal of living sustainably: loss of our unique biodiversity, loss and degradation of productive rural land, the state of our inland rivers, especially the Murray-Darling system, pressures on the coastal zone, mainly from increasing population and from migration to the inland to the coast, and rapidly increasing greenhouse gas emissions. There have been 5 subsequent reports, the most recent irresponsibly suppressed by the Morrison government until safely after the election, all of which have said the same 5 problems with increasing volume, because all of those 5 problems are still getting worse. At the global level, in 1992, the world's scientists issued a warning to humanity about the environmental consequences of what we were doing. And in 2017, they published a second warning 25 years later, and I'm one of the 15,000 scientists around the world who endorsed that second warning. And in that they said, reviewing what had happened in the previous 25 years, there was one success story. The, not phasing out completely, but the dramatic reduction in the release of chlorofluorocarbons had slowed down the destruction of the ozone layer, stabilised it, and there was a fair chance that it would recover over the next 50 years. That is the one success story. Every other important indicator has gone south in the last 25 years. Freshwater per capita down 25%. The world fish catch down 20%. We've lost 100 million hectares of net forest area. The number of ocean dead zones has more or less doubled. Rate of releasing greenhouse gases has almost doubled. Climate change has accelerated. But perhaps the most alarming figure, in 1992, species abundance was 60% of what it had been in 1970. By 2017, it was 40% of what it had been in 2017. And the truly alarming statistic is today, 96% of the mass of mammals on the planet is the mass of humans and our domesticated livestock. Only 4% of the mass of mammals on the planet is now wild animals living not for the benefit of humans. So we are really losing species. The critical indicator, we are losing species at a rate comparable with that of the 5 great extinction episodes in the Earth's history, all of which were caused by natural phenomena. But this extinction episode...
Sorry, we've just got a small emergency. Does somebody have a Prado with a rego plate EYN20J?
EYN20J.
Blocking somebody getting to a hospital.
It's just out here.
EYN20J. It's a silver Prado with a tow bar. Behind the hall. Just behind the hall. Yeah, thanks. Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay. The critical point about the loss of biodiversity is that we just don't know the significance of what we're losing. And the real picture is almost certainly much worse than we know about.
in that first State of the Environment report, we estimated that we've probably only identified 10 or 15% of the other species that we share this continent with. There are still surprises even at quite high levels of organisation. We identified the Wallamai pine, which is a tree that grows to 30 metres in height within 100 metres of Sydney, which was, quote, discovered, end of quote, in other words, recognised by whitefella science within the last decade. There is almost certainly a whole heap of biodiversity out there that we don't know that we are losing. What we do know is that since 1788 we've lost at least 30 mammal species that we know about and have identified, 29 bird species that we know about, reptiles, amphibians. We have the worst record of vertebrate extinction of any country in the world, not something to be proud of. Now we know what causes the loss of biodiversity. Historically, the destruction of habitat, introduced species and chemical pollution. And all of those are more or less directly responsible, directly accounted for by the demands of the human population. Every year there are more of us, and every year our per capita demands increase. Every year we want the gross domestic product to become more gross. And the implications of government policy is that if only we are sufficiently wealthy, all our problems can be solved. I'm not here to promote my little book, so I won't say that I've just written a book called Australia on the Brink, Avoiding Environmental Ruin, $19.99 at all good bookshops. I won't mention that, but in that I recount what I think is the fundamental problem, and that is our refusal to admit the impossibility of unlimited growth in a closed system. Even if we're dramatically successful in winding back greenhouse gas emissions, for example, all the good will be undone in a generation or two by there being more of us and us consuming more. Richard Eckersley tells the story that he asks people, given what you know about your situation and the state of the world, is it absolutely your highest priority to be twice as wealthy in 20 years and consume twice as much? And he says that he's never yet found anyone who says that's the highest priority. A lot of people don't even see it as desirable to be twice as wealthy and consuming twice as much. Even those who think that would be a good thing usually rank it below other desirables, like having a secure job, being in a secure relationship, having happy children, living in a nice environment, having good surroundings. But he said, if you think of government policy, for governments, Labor and coalition, national and state, the absolute highest priority is 3 to 4% per annum economic growth. In other words, becoming twice as wealthy in 20 years and consuming twice as much. And that is seen as the highest priority that overrides environmental problems, overrides human rights, overrides growing inequality. It's seen as the top priority. And until we accept that there are limits to human consumption, until we accept, as the indigenous people did for thousands of years, that it's our responsibility to live within the limits of natural systems, then all of the small gestures about protecting a patch of forest or cleaning up our energy supply will be pissing in the wind. So fundamentally, if we want to exercise that basic responsibility to think of the interests of future generations, to think of the other species that we share this continent with, fundamentally we have to be thinking about how we change the trajectory of development from one that presumes unlimited growth is possible to one that aims at a soft landing, a future in which we live sustainably within the limits of natural systems, in which we educate our children and our grandchildren, or perhaps more importantly, are educated by our children and our grandchildren to listen to their needs and to think first of what we're handing on. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor Ian Lowe. That 1992 document was the start of my entire life engaging in this world. But I think now it's time to hear from Emma. Speaking of, so Emma has joined us, and Wenzel. Are you speaking together? Emma and then Wenzel. fantastic young people have been. Emma and Wenzel from Blockade Australia.
I don't think.
Thank you. And also thank you to the Widjabul Waibal people for welcoming us onto their country for this festival and the way they cared for it for so long. So yeah, my name is Emma, and I guess I've been involved in direct action and community organising over the last 6 years or so, from blockade camps to kind of city street-based mobilisations, community organising, mutual aid projects or refugee activism, and then most recently Blockade Australia. So I guess that's some of the experiences that have led me to what I'll share today. And I like what you said about the direct action, and I just wanted to link onto that end because it links with what we were talking about before. But doing it when it's like necessary and right, even when you're not sure if it will exactly win or what will come of it. Like a couple of years ago, some of you may have heard about a detention centre that was at a hotel in Brisbane at Kangaroo Point, and it was being used to house 119 refugees, and those refugees started protesting on the balcony at the beginning of COVID and basically alerted us to where they were and what was going on. And people also started protesting there, including stopping transport vans and blockading it for 72 days. And some of us who were a bit more cynical, had been doing things for a few years, didn't really, including people, battling with the Serco security guards to stop transport vans. And we still didn't really believe, a few of us, for the whole time really, that it would work. But it just felt like the right thing to do. And now those 119 men are all free, and one of them came to Mardi Gras last weekend. So, Anyway, so I think it's always worth doing something that you believe in, even if you're not sure. You'll probably lose, but you'll probably meet some great people along the way. So I guess what I think the greatest environmental issue of our time, I couldn't pick a single one. There's so many horrific things happening in the world that have been mentioned. I think at the crux of it all, it is the destructive system, that system that relies on, is dependent on unlimited growth in a finite planet. So capitalism, essentially, and the way that our systems are designed. They're not, it gets said that sometimes that our systems are broken and we need to fix them, but I don't understand what we're fixing back to. I mean, this was a penal colony that used slaves to take land and dispossess people and commit genocide and destroy most of the natural environment on this continent. Like, I don't know what I don't think it's broken. I think it's working exactly as designed and as, an extractive resource project to make money for the wealthy. I guess... And I see all these things as all connected. I think as long as we have these systems that are based on power over and exploitation and controls people in order to extract and exploit resources and land, I think that there will always be environmental issues amongst a myriad of other social issues. We could potentially have green capitalism, or we could potentially maybe have a society that isn't sexist. But I think as long as that we're relying on that unlimited growth, there's always going to be something or someone being exploited. There are wars in the Middle East, right? that are killing people and displacing people off lands and causing refugees to flee to places like so-called Australia, who imprisons them indefinitely so that they can extract, oil out of the ground and then, pollute the atmosphere. So it's all, I see it all as very interconnected. And I think that even as we campaign on individual issues, by talking about them this way and seeing them and then acting as if they are interconnected, I guess I think it gives us the opportunity to act in a way that, attacks the system as a whole and not, instead of attempting to, I guess, reform that individual issue. And then I think that creates strengths across movements because we're all recognising that kind of common enemy. Rather than saying, oh, well, my issue is more important, or well, I just do this work, or, whatever. And I guess I think in saying that, and then that this is such a global fight, which can seem quite scary, but, it is nice to remind ourselves and look at campaigns overseas and see that people are doing the kind of work that we are doing everywhere against their, own oppressive governments. But we do have a massive responsibility here, I think, because Australia is such a, huge, I think it's the world's, last time I checked, but the world's largest exporter of coal and gas. So we obviously have a massive, third now? Okay. Third, but still we have a huge responsibility to stop that impact on the world. As it goes out. So I think that's basically what I wanted to say. We also have...
Thank you. That was pretty much, covered a lot of things and really nicely, so I can just fill in some other ideas that I have. Yeah, my name's Wenzel. I've been involved in some forest camps, some refugee activism, environmental activism, and kind of trying to focus a lot of that on systemic, framing the climate crisis as more of a systemic crisis and targeting the kind of system as a result, or perhaps the climate crisis as a result of the way that the system is built on this continent. Also involved with Blockade Australia, which the idea, I guess, kind of built off some of the things that Ian was talking about, but the amount of different forest blockades and mines and different resource extraction sites on this continent and the inability to kind of protect them all because of the amount of human resources and just the power of the state to just find another one, perhaps if you've managed to successfully defend one area or something. And so I guess, taking that into account and kind of recognizing that all of these are kind of linked by this bigger force. The idea was to kind of get all of the actions together and offensively go to kind of the heart of this kind of system, which we saw at the time as, I guess, the economy where we could perhaps interrupt the flow of goods and services to its maximum possible disruption, which we saw as Sydney. I guess the strategy was to unite all these activists around kind of the united idea that we need climate action. We need it as soon as possible. We don't have time, we don't have the resources to be defending individually. We need to work together on this continent and go and offensively try and kind of take down some of this system that is so evidently just relentlessly plundering. So that was part of that was that is the strategy, I guess, perhaps of Blockade Australia, and I guess I've only obviously been able to be active in the last sort of decade, perhaps because of my age, and just am so aware of all of the increased surveillance and the difficulties that kind of we face as activists today. In Sydney, we were, it's severe repression from bail, and there's like Supreme Court warrants on me as an individual to surveil and track and kind of, really, really limit the ability for activists to kind of continue doing this work. And often it's like, I guess just because like it is so impending, and like the longer we wait, the harder it becomes because of surveillance, and the more destruction there is, the like necessity to do it at this like moment in time is like really important. And so like, I guess, just remembering that, like, I don't know, I guess just having to like kind of take that as the most important thing to fight against in your life, and prioritize that. So I guess hoping that a lot of people are not, expecting the younger generation to kind of take that fight by themselves or something, or like still being like engaged in today. And that could even look like a lot of support for those people, perhaps, because like obviously my car is flagged, some of my phone is not able to be used for certain things, and so like sharing that kind of those resources around available for other activists to use and stuff is like also like a really, really important thing that we can all do. I guess Emma wanted me to bring up a 96-year-old person locking on at the Newcastle coal port, which is the biggest coal port in the world. It doesn't end by age. I think that's everything I've got on my mind at the moment, so thank you.
Woo! It's so wonderful having seen so much of the work that Blockade Australia and Fireproof have done over the past couple of years in those major centres to draw to attention the climate crisis we're in. I'm just going to quickly touch on what I see right now in terms of our state, New South Wales. I'm just going to bring it here to the politics of right now and what are the greatest environmental issues facing us, where the opportunities are for us all to act together, and how we're going to win on some of those. So at the moment, what we have is a brand new government in New South Wales. I touched on it earlier. We've just had 12 very long, dark, dangerous years of coalition rule in New South Wales. When the coalition rules in a particular area, what it means is the National Party has control of all of our natural resource-based portfolios. So we're talking water, forests, land clearing, agriculture, coal, gas, all of the resources we extract. It has been the National Party that has been in control of those resources and those really important policies of government. And that's why we saw in the dying days, and they have died right now, the National Party and the Liberal Party in New South Wales, that's why we saw in their dying days last year and the year before the war on our koalas. Like, who would have ever imagined that you would have a bunch of men sitting in a Parliament House declaring war on koalas? Because that's what actually happened. They sat in that house, they ran around those corridors, they went back to their electorates, they sat at their desk with their property developer mates, and they said, how will we get rid of those laws that protect koalas? So that to me was about probably the lowest point that we could possibly find ourselves in here in New South Wales. And remember, this was following the parliamentary inquiry the year before that found in no uncertain terms in this state, koalas will be extinct in the wild by 2050 unless we do something. 2050, it's 2023 now. That's, as far as we can see, without even blinking, koalas are gone, literally gone. We're still on that trajectory. Not enough has yet changed since that finding, since we killed part of the war on koalas last year, and since we got a new government 8 weeks ago. We're still on the trajectory. If we can't literally save koalas here in New South Wales from going extinct, we actually can't do anything for the environment in terms of positive protection measures and in terms of winning. So the thing is, we are going to win. So we've now got a change of government. It's a small Labor government. There is a progressive crossbench, and I know that, I'm just going to digress for 2 seconds. I know that we do want to break a system. We want to redevelop, we want to redesign a system, but remember, I can't believe I'm going to say this, we're going to walk and chew gum at the same time. Gum's terrible, isn't it? We're going to walk and bounce balls at the same time. We're going to walk, we're going to plant trees, and we're going to protect koalas all at the same time together. That's what we're going to do. So we have got a small Labor government. They're a new government. They're not particularly ambitious, but they didn't win the majority they thought that they wanted to win. We've got a progressive crossbench in the lower house of Parliament in New South Wales and the upper house in New South Wales. So everything this Labor government does, it needs the progressive crossbench. Right now, that progressive crossbench went to the election to get elected on the basis of getting climate action and trying to reverse the extinction crisis upon us. So we've got some really good people in there, but you know what? Good people in Parliament kind of don't do things unless because there's a lot going on, but they need the support to do it. They need the pressure to do it. They need the comfort and the discomfort to make them do these things. This first year of this new government, after 12 years of coalition, is the most important year for the next 8 years, likely, in terms of getting outcomes. We need to be working together to get these outcomes early. So the most important issues we've got, climate change. Australia is the third largest coal exporter in the world. New South Wales harbours the largest coal port in the world, that is Newcastle. We have a plan with all of the amazing activists, with all of the amazing Rising Tide, all of the people across the country to close down the Newcastle coal port, exporting coal by 2030. Very ambitious, but we could do it if we all work together. So right now, this New South Wales Labor government is going to legislate climate targets. Zero net emissions by 2050. Every scientist that's been part of the IPCC reporting tells us 2050 is too late, especially for us here with our emissions per capita and with how fast we're exporting and fueling the global climate crisis with our own coal. So 2040 is the latest we need to be net zero emissions. So right now, your climate change minister, Penny Sharp in New South Wales, is working out what her legislated targets can be. I asked her a question in Parliament last week, 2050, is that too late? What's she going to do? She's looking around to know what target can she legislate. She did what the feds did. You know, it's a floor, not a ceiling. It's a floor, not a ceiling. Well, for all of us, it's not enough. We need legislated targets to reduce our emissions much more ambitious than 2050 net zero emissions. So that's something we all need to work on together because that is absolutely fundamental. The other one Ian identified, which is my pet, which is the issue that has kept me going and made me work every single day since I was 17, and that is biodiversity loss. We are literally losing biodiversity. You heard it from the good professor here. We could not be losing it any faster, I don't think, if we tried any harder. It is so bad how fast it is. We saw the fish kill. We've seen the Murray-Darling. We know that inland river system right now is literally viewed as an irrigation channel because that's what the Nats turned it into. It's a living, wild river. We all need to work together to put the pressure on to rewild the Murray-Darling, to put it back into the hands of First Nations management and to manage that river so that it can survive and thrive once again. Land clearing, we're still clearing land. We've got to stop land clearing, and we can rein it in now. We've got an offset system that's completely broken. The current government knows it's broken. We've got a review at the moment from the Biodiversity Conservation Act, which is headed up by Ken Henry and a bunch of other people. They're doing a review. They're likely to bring in how we can better protect biodiversity in New South Wales, and it won't be through a defunct offset system. But the one that I really want to leave you with, that we can win, and we can win it really quickly, and it's urgent, and we need to win it, and that is we need to end logging our public native forests. It's really straightforward. So, We can do this one. At the moment, the current government has not committed to it. But all those crossbenchers, all those Greens went to the election before March 25th and said, we're going to end the logging of our public native forest estate. We know we need to do it, but the Labor government didn't. All the Labor government went to the election with was the promise that they will create a Great Koala National Park in the hinterland behind Coffs Harbour. And they're still logging that. They're still logging that until they create that park. So we have to put the pressure on. We have to build the alliance in the next few months really strongly to end the logging of our public native forest. I met with Bob Carr. Do you remember Bob Carr? He was the Premier in 1995, the last time the Labor government really went to victory after a period of coalition government. And that was the beginning of the last time the Labor government was ever in power. I sat down with Bob Carr 2 weeks ago and said, Bob, what are we all going to do together? He started saving the forests, and now it's time to end that work to save the forests. So he said, along with other people, we're all building that alliance. We've got to work together. We've got to put the pressure on this existing government. We've got to do everything we can. Your local member, your upper house people, everyone. Write weekly to them. Simple things saying, we're ready. It's time. We end the logging now of our public native forest estate. You join the campaigns, etc. So where does this go, though? Yes, we end the logging of our public native forest estate. But in terms of biodiversity protection, we know it's got to happen across the landscape. We know we've got to do more than end the logging of our public native forest estate. We know at the moment we've got to build a protected area network and manage everything off that well. But in terms of building the protected area network, this is what I finish on. Right now, only around 10%, 11% of the whole of New South Wales land is in a protected area. Part of the protected area network. So managed for conservation, protected for its own ecosystem function, to just be there, to protect all of us, to produce water, to help soils be healthy, to provide habitat, to be carbon sequestrers, to all the other values. And only 10%, right? So we need to build that protected area network. So the cunning plan is, let's build it by 30% to 2030. Let's be more ambitious. Let's build it to 50% by 2030. I'm getting carried away. There's no way we're going to do that, but let's try anyway. At least, people, at least 30% of this state protected for nature and everything else, including ourselves, by 2030. With a massive, amazing team of people all plurking together. So plurking is playing and working. Imagine 30% of this beautiful state with all the amazing people plurking together to regenerate it, to nurture it, to manage it, and to look after it, while we change the entire system and work on all the other things like equality and love and fairness and all the other things together. Okay, now, so the next person you're going to hear from about what are the biggest environmental challenges of now is the amazing Nan Nicholson.
Okay, is that working? Okay. Hi everyone. I must say it's so fantastic to have these young people here. I'm thrilled to bits. It's the meaning of it all. And it reminds me when in 2000, when a bunch of us went to Melbourne to the World Economic Forum to blockade it, one of my kids, who's now an environmental lawyer, said to an old bloke who was probably about my age now, said to him, gee, it's great to have people your age here. And he turned to her and said, and a little smile, and said, it's great to have people your age here. so put it right back at it. I've got a few things the one thing I could say is that our massive disconnection from nature is the source of all our problems because we think we're separate. But I have to go with this ridiculous Ponzi scheme of growth without limit. And Ponzi schemes, they're illegal for a really good reason. They collapse. And the bottom of the triangle has millions of victims, and they all die. And then below that is nature, which is the biggest victim of all. So this growth without limit philosophy, which underpins our entire society, is so nutty. It's sort of like planning a flight path for an airline based on the fact that the Earth's flat. It's just so nutty, but we seem to depend on it entirely and never really challenge it. And for me, that's the basis of a lot of what I do. I might look like I love forests and I hate dams and a few other things, but the bottom line is that I have to undermine this system before it kills us all. Yeah. I wanted to mention that you may know about the 75 rule, and it's a really easy formula for working out the doubling times of things. So if you've got a 10% increase every year, you divide 75% by 10, 7.5, that's how many years it is to double at a 10% increase rate. So with a reasonable economic growth is 3 to 4%, that's what they aim for. Divide 75 by that and you get 25 years. Divide 75 by 3, you get 25 years is the doubling time. But that means that another 25 years after that, you've got to have 4 times as much as you had in the first place. Waters, soils, police stations, schools, hospitals. And then another 25 years after that, you've got to have 8 times what you started with. It is plainly, completely screwed up. But somehow we all keep depending on it. Yeah, it's just, yeah, why do we accept it? So I won't go on. What I'd like to also mention is the fact that what Emma said was that we've got to solve all these problems at once. It's not just the growth and the forests and the climate change and everything else. It's that we have to do them simultaneously. And because of that, I want to plug this book by Greta Thunberg. I don't know if you've seen it. It's only $50. She's got everything divided into lots of little chapters, and they're very digestible. So you can read 2 pages over breakfast. And it does make you get really depressed at times, but it also completely fills you in about what's going on. So I can really recommend, actually I had thought of sending a copy to every damn politician in the country, but I didn't have that sort of money. But this will give you the complete rundown on what we have to do to save ourselves. I think that's all I've got to say. I've probably got lots more, but that'll do. Sorry, just one more thing. With the Danoon Dam, the whole point of that dam is to provide resources for infinite growth on the coast. So even though we're fighting the forest and the Widgeable sites, the whole point of it is to get Ballina and Byron Bay growing forever. So that's why I'm opposing it.
Okay, the next person you're going to hear from is the amazing Valerie Thompson, who spent days up a tree recently.
But just in passing, so you're right when the politicians say that the target, the inadequate target, is not a ceiling, it's a floor. The problem is you think they spell it F-L-O-O-R. It's F-L-A-W. It's a floor, all right. It's totally bloody inadequate.
Hi, hello everyone. It's good to see you all. This is totally exciting. I'd like to start by acknowledging country again, and I do apologise for going to turn my phone off at the exact moment it rang. And so in terms of acknowledging country again, to me, one of the biggest issues that we have is that we need to decolonise our activities and we need to decolonise our movements and really, in lots of ways, be led by the campaigns that First Nations people and have been running in this country for a long time. And I do need to say I cringed a bit last night when I heard the statements that we have the first successful blockades of, protecting country in the world when, of course, we don't even have them in Australia. They have always been First Nations led. And so we need to keep that in mind. I think it is our history and it really helps inform where we go. There's so much wisdom that we do need to tap into, and I definitely don't make assumptions around people's heritage, but I do really want to see more First Nations led conversations in this space. So it wasn't exactly what I was going to say, but it just came straight to mind. I really want to... I didn't come with anything prepared because there was just so much wisdom, and I was hoping I'd go last just to wrap it up, because I feel I'm in the presence of a lot of royalty here, and that includes the young people. And so I really want to be led also by some of what's happening with our young people, because essentially at the end of the day what's happening right now is that we're not gearing up for a climate crisis and an extinction crisis. We're right in the middle of it. And that's already happened in our lifetime, but it's happening based on the systems that have been building for generations before us, but it's having a really profound impact on young people. And the way forward for us is a way that really takes that into account. Thank you, Michelle, because I know that you're working in that space already. So when I talk to, say, for example, my daughter around what's happening, there's a few things, like it's like, you lot made these problems, you go out and sort it. It's like, and obviously behind that is those systems that have been making it for a long time before we came along. There's also, of course, huge rates of suicide, self-harm, and anxiety and depression around young people. That's almost quite debilitating for a lot of young people. It's not just some young people, it's lots and lots of young people. So anything that we create needs to be life-affirming, and it needs to be reconnecting to nature. And there's a huge cost to not doing that, and I can see that around myself every single day. So the question to us is around how we create ourselves as intergenerational in terms of passing that on. And I'll give you some examples of that, because it really links into the other comment that I want to make, which is that the systems that we have been fighting against are getting smarter, and I wonder, we need to change our tactics, which is one of the reasons I do like the work that Blockade Australia and XR, etc., have really looked at the idea that whatever we've done to date hasn't exactly worked. We're not been wrong. And when we start doing these things, that they're appropriate responses for the time, but the system is changing quite quickly, and the tactics that did work don't work now. Like, I can say categorically, to the extent even that sometimes with some of the XR, anything that's massively destabilising, fascists have already, and right wing have already worked out how to get in there, and take over any power space that there is. So we just need to be so aware that is changing so quickly. And a classic example is, for example, around how AI is already being used a lot in the algorithm, Facebook, etc., so that young people know about sustainability and this sustainability agenda from 1992, because it's a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy theory that they're out to get people, and they are terrified, to the extent you've got these, the smarter cities, you've got these people who just go, I won't be trapped in a city where I can walk 15 minutes to work or whatever, because there is a conspiracy that it's a prison, right? So, we really need to be mindful that these, the last time I got involved with an XR thing, we got dressed up and we walked solemnly through the streets, got yelled at. That's not the real issue. The real issue is vaccination. So I think, and this is not an accident. This is part of what's undermining our current movement, and where, in terms of where we can go with that, is really, again, looking towards those sort of native speakers of technology and others to make sure that we're bringing in new ways of doing things that are speaking to what's currently going on and what our systems are doing right now, and of course the First Nations wisdom. So in the same way that we used to go for conventional media, again, particularly on the way we currently ingest media, there's just so much opportunity for that to be manipulated through AI and other techniques. So I think that keeping up with that is part of the answer as well. So I just want to leave it there because I'm going into solutions, and am I passing to Eddie?
Just a quick announcement. There's a new film that's going to be going on pretty quickly, and we thank Lisa Yates for bringing it to us. It's The River, and they're going to put it on over at Birth and Beyond. So thank you, Lisa, and let's continue.
So what's the biggest problem? That's a big question, really, because there's so many aspects to it. As other speakers have pointed out, you can't deal with it all at once, really. I don't think. And obviously, climate change is the overwhelming factor that's going to dramatically affect our future. And you've got to stop coal and gas, obviously, to deal with that issue. But what I've done with my life, I suppose, is focus on issues that I feel particularly passionate about. So, I started off with rainforests, and then I got into forest generally and devoted a lot of my life to it. And then I moved down the coast and focused on coastal development issues and coastal erosion and rising sea levels. Tried to do something about that, and then I got into the marine environment and tried to do something about improving the conservation marine environment. And then I ended up going back to forest because I felt I was particularly good at it, I suppose, and could make some leeway. But all those issues are important, and there are only some of the multitude of issues out there. So I'm back on forest, and I got involved part-time again in 2009, and it just sort of gradually took over my life again until it's virtually ruling my life at the moment. But it is something that I see that we're on the cusp of doing something about. I really feel positive for the first time, as Sue said, after the 12 years of darkness, that we can actually achieve something here, and something big, like I go out to the forest, and for years, since the early 90s, I've been complaining about this thing called bell mine or associated dieback. And you go out west out of here, the Richmond Range and the Upper Clarence and so on, it's just run rampant, and I watched it happen, and I tried to do something about it, and I just got ignored. Bell mine associated dieback is when you get lantana understories that just get rampant. So you get this dense lantana understory, and then you get a native species. First off, you remove half the canopy or a large part of the canopy. You create all that soil disturbance. Lantana loves it and takes over. And then following on the lantana with that open overstory, you get bell miners, bell birds, There's fantastic native bird, but we've created new habitat for it. And its populations just explode, and it chases away most other native species. So it actually depopulates the forest for most other species. Only very few can withstand their aggressive mobbing. And then we get these little tiny sap-sucking psyllids that live on the leaves and suck the life out of the trees, out of the eucalypts. They feed on eucalypt leaves. And so the forest starts dying. And I've seen this in places, and I had a property that had some of it. It goes on for decades. You get these sick, dying forests where the trees can no longer reproduce. They don't flower, they don't set seeds, they don't get that seed storage in the soil they used to have. And the lantana gets thicker as the canopy thins. It's a self-perpetuating problem. And then we've got climate change coming in on top of it, and it makes it worse. It puts the trees under increased stress, particularly in droughts. Under increased stress, like koalas, like anything else, they get sicker, like we do. And so it's making the problem worse and spreading across the landscape. And part of that, and part of the precursor to it, is lantana. You go out in the forest now, and they're just being overtaken by lantana, and it's just so disgusting, really, because again, that's displacing all those native understory species, as well as ultimately leading to bell mine associated dieback. And then we had the fires in 2019-20. Like when I first came up here, rainforest was my love, I came up here to be near rainforests, and that's what I spent, the first years of my activism working on. And a third to 40% of our rainforests burnt in those fires. Now, rainforest doesn't burn, occasionally once upon a time a fire would go into it. But 30 to 40% of our rainforest, these precious relics from Gondwana, got burnt in that one event. Now, look, some of those recover. A lot of them are going to cycle back to early succession. They get taken over by stinging trees and weeds and so on. It's a really slow recovery process for those rainforests, and they're really vulnerable in the interim. And so part of the contributor to those fires was lantana, number one, because you get lantana come in, you get those dense thickets, and it spreads up into the rainforest margins, and it spreads the fire with it when we get a bad fire. We also cut out a lot of the trees out of the forest. We dry them out. We leave all this debris around, and even decades later, like up in Wine and Nightcap, that logging debris was still there and still fed the fires. It's quite frightening. It's not something that just goes away overnight. So we've increased the flammability of our forests. We've dried them out. We've increased the weeds in the understory. Another effect it has is water. Our forests yield water, and the water we get from our forests is what's left over. The trees, vegetation uses most of the water and sends it back up into the atmosphere as transpiration. And then that transpiration, by the way, often lands as rainfall somewhere else. So it's a large part of our climate system is this process of trees creating transpiration. In that process, they cool the land, they take the heat out of the ground and take it back up to the atmosphere, as well as creating rainfall. The trouble is, though, when you've got regrowth, it uses 2 to 3 times as much water as an old growth forest. So our forests are drying out from all this water being sucked out of the system. Our streams are drying out, and species are declining. And then the other big one, I think, is probably carbon, where in our forests, I assessed some forests just south of Casino there, where I measured all the trees and worked out the carbon balance of what the old growth had and what the regrowth had. And those forests had lost about 500 tonnes of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere per hectare. So this is all the spotted gum forests just south of Casino, which are heavily degraded. But I also worked out that if we stopped logging them, logging itself would release 57 tonnes of carbon per hectare to the atmosphere. So just by logging them, we're increasing that input. And that's per hectare. So you think about what you can do. Like what the average carbon emission in Australia is 22 tonnes per person. You can just go stop logging a couple of hectares of forest, and you've made up for your contribution. And then not only do you avoid that emission, over time those forests would sequester an extra 6.3 tonnes of carbon per hectare. So you protect a few hectares, and you're making up for your lifetime's worth of carbon emissions, or for the average person's lifetime emissions. So forests are incredibly important to us who live in the surrounds of forests, because they provide all those benefits to us, and they're in danger of collapse. They're really teetering on the brink, and we've seen so many species decline in them. I look at you think that when white people first came here, a lot of these forests would have been teeming with wildlife. And we look at them now, and they've probably got, a quarter or a tenth of what used to be there. And then we say, oh, well, look, there's still one of those there. And look, it's still there after logging. Oh, look, no problem at all. We're not having any effect at all. But what we're seeing is ecosystem collapse, where our species are collapsing over time in our forests. And, it's so distressing. I think the one people use these days is greater glider. You just go out in the forest and go spotlighting, you see greater gliders everywhere, particularly in the highland forest. You go out there now and they're rare. And you go to the coastal forest, there's bloody none of them, because we're taking out all the hollow-bearing trees, So we're contributing to this collapse of species, and our forests are really important for our species. So while there's a multitude of issues, I believe we're at the cusp of success in protecting forests, if we care to, and that will make a significant difference to all those species who need the mature trees and for nectar. Like with our flying foxes have to move into the towns because they're running out of nectar in the forest. All those species need hollow-bearing trees, and for our water, for our rainfall, for our air, and to help start addressing the climate problem and start reducing some of the atmospheric carbon by allowing our forests to recover, to draw down that carbon that's been released from them over the last century. So they are part of the solution, and they're part that we can affect if we work on it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go on to the next one. We only have 5 minutes for this session.
Yeah, I better talk fast. And I really don't have a lot to add because what an incredible panel of expertise that we've got here today. I mean, I just was thinking when Dailan was talking, there's no book about NEFA. I wish someone would write a book about NEFA and all of the wins and successes and all of the things that we can learn from, and a podcast of Dailan talking. Like, I was just trying to take it all in. I was like, wow, what a great summary of the situation. So, yeah, I'm really humbled to be here, and I just wanted to say that book, the Greta book that Nan's got there is freaking incredible. I bought 3 copies for people over Christmas. It's a collection of essays, and I actually read so much doom and gloom climate change books, and I got it and I was dreading reading another one, but I felt I had to, and I actually felt inspired because it gave me so much information, and knowledge is power, and there are so many little chapters, big chapters that you can read. There's so many amazing chapters, and you can just have a little bit with your cereal and a little bit before you go to bed, and you'll be done. And the Franklin movie as well, I'm sorry that you're here because it's such an inspiration, but let's not forget where the first protest logging happened. It's right here in this region, not Franklin, even though that was an amazing story, but right here. I don't need to go into the environmental issues of today because we all know them. Everyone in this room, I'm talking to a group of sycophants here really. Fossil fuel driven, cascades of climate chaos all around us, you know, floods and fires and the consequential extinction crisis and the biodiversity loss. We're all very aware of that, you know, but I wanted to, you know, give a bit of hope, I think, in that weather events that have happened, these extreme events and the pandemic. They've given us really important lessons in vulnerability and risk and what degrowth actually looks like. Because most people out there don't know what degrowth means, and it's something we should start talking about more. Because people think degrowth is a threat to them and their stuff and what they can have, but it's actually not. And I think that was probably the biggest gift of the pandemic for me, and what I saw for people in the cities as well. We all had to slow down. We all lived a little bit closer to the seasons. Around here, we connected. I saw people at our community markets that normally shop at Woolworths and Coles. People were out and about connecting more when you could, at a safe distance, of course. People were getting back in their gardens. Like, look at the boom of people who were gardening again and growing their own vegetables. And I'm a bit scared that that's going to get lost now. So that's something that we all should continue to, you know, develop within our community and our conversations, things like that, to live snow. And the other thing that we saw was the political will. Now, agree or disagree with what happened, the lockdowns, the vaccinations, whatever, put that aside. We saw our government spend right across the world trillions of dollars in addressing this pandemic. So when they need to do something and take action, they can do it. They can do it, and that's what the pandemic showed us all. So we need to remind them about that when they're doing their budget and giving $368 billion to submarines over there and none to the Aboriginal Legal Service and, you know, continuing native forest logging even though it's losing us millions of dollars a year. We need to remember that they've just got their priorities wrong and we need to recalibrate their priorities. So what I feel like we're seeing is the demise in denial and the rise in activism, because people are becoming more aware because the water is literally lapping at people's doorstep. It's still hard for people in the city, I think, to understand what's actually happened here, because what happened for us, you know, our world just shifted, and nothing for anyone here who experienced that. Everyone knows that life will never, ever be the same again. We stared down the barrel of the end of the world, and that has changed me so much, but it has motivated me to want to get out there and spread the message about what's coming to everybody's doorstep if we don't do something now. So when we talk about issues, environmental issues, I think let's flip that anthropogenic term, and what are the issues for the environment? And the issues for the environment are really similar to our issues. The blockages, the challenges, they're legal, they're political, they're social. In terms of, you know, be a tree. You know, imagine what you're faced with. What's your challenge? Habitat loss. Why is that happening? Logging. You know, just start to think a bit differently about it. With politics, you know, we're seeing a corruption of our democracy. We're losing our voice. We're seeing, you know, the politicians being captured by the fossil fuel industry and other dirty donations. Who are the ones that are making all the decisions? It's not you and I. Our voice is being lost. We're getting fed bullshit by the media, who are just regurgitating the spin from each politician, and they're not doing their job either. And there's a great chapter in that book about changing the media narrative by George Monbiot, who is an absolute legend. You should read every one of his articles he's ever written. He's got a fantastic chapter in there about changing the media narrative, okay? Because the media have got a public job to do, and their job is to report in the public interest matters that impact us. And right now, they are not doing that about climate change. They were seen to be doing it about their pandemic. They were giving us the evidence. They were giving us the facts. It was very clinical. But this, you know, which is a crisis, this climate crisis, they're not doing that for some reason. So we need to really question the media, and we need to call them to account constantly, and we need to fact check. And we also need to fact check our politicians, okay? Go to your local politician. Do not just accept what they say. Dig down, do some research, you know, find out whether it's the truth. The Great Koala National Park is one example that we all need to be talking about, okay? Let's hope that Koala Park happens, okay? But let's not be, you know, like fooled that it's going to be easy for that Great Koala National Park, and let's not be fooled and think that that is not going to be to the adverse of our state forests here. $89 or something million they're spending to engage with the stakeholders before they decide the size of the Great Koala National Park, which I can tell you, after they've talked to the CFMEU, they've talked to the Forestry Corp New South Wales, after they've talked to the politicians, that footprint is going to be quite small, okay? And so the other thing is, while everyone in the city and all the politicians are focused on the koala and the Great Koala National Park, Double Duke's getting logged to buggery. Our Southwest Casino's getting logged to buggery. Our national parks locally, we need to be standing up for them, because they are just as important in their biodiversity values as all of the national parks that are in that footprint for the Great Koala National Park. And the other thing we need to do is, I love koalas, and my son's having a koala party in a few weeks. I love koalas, but the more, I just fear that it's just, if we zone in on koalas and narrow down on koalas, we are not going to help repair the biodiversity, because there are many, many, many other, not just animals, but plant species that we need to start educating people on. We've got greater gliders, yellow-bellied gliders, we've got all of the different forest owls, we've got so many animals that are vulnerable, on that path to threatened, on that path to endangered, which will then be extinct. So we cannot just focus on the koala. We need to be talking about all of the other animals, okay, that are at threat by logging and bushfires. In regard to the lantana, let's face it, the only reason why we've got this bell miner dieback situation is because of the logging industry. That's how come the lantana has been able to come in and take over. And it also is a threat to koalas, because they go right around the trees and the koalas can't get up the trees, and other animals that like to, you know, climb the trees and sap the wood, like the yellow-bellied glider. So in regard to what you can do locally, go to your local MP and wedge them. Wedge them with a cute, fluffy picture of a greater glider. Wedge them with whatever you have got. Take your child with you. Make them feel guilty. Remind them of who they are supposed to be representing. Not the fossil fuels, okay? And not the gambling industry, and not the tobacco industry, and not the forestry industry. We are their constituents, and they are supposed to serve us. So front up to their office. There's an ongoing campaign in Lismore outside Janelle Saffin's office. Janelle Saffin, during the election campaign, before she was elected, told the Nimbin Good Times that she believed that democracy was at stake with these protest laws, so we need to continue to remind her of that. She also wants to see a Great Koala National Park and an end to native forest logging, but her party doesn't, so we need to be reminding her that that's her view, so that when the amazing Sue Higginson or one of her colleagues in Parliament introduces a bill to end native forest logging, which she's done just the other day, and any other bill related to any position that Janelle has said she supported, you need to go to her and say, hey, are you going to cross the floor? Are you going to join the crossbench? Are you going to support the bill or not? Because you said you would. We've got to hold our politicians to account and continue to expose them. And yeah, the last thing I wanted to say was that it's my view, and we need to tell our politicians this, that there's many, 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 many more jobs in healing country than harming country. Go out to the forest and have a look and see what's out there. Little things you can do: plant a tree, join a land care group, go to your kids' school and say, are you engaged with a land care group to do some river planting or anything like that? Build a national park in your own backyard. Get some amazing native species in there. Bring the birds and the bees and everything back, and then your neighbour might. And then you've got a corridor before you know it. There are so many things that we can be doing. The most important thing that's coming our way is the logging of our native forests, so we all need to get up and get to the forests and stop the insanity.
I'm sorry, but we don't have time for questions because we've got a very tight little schedule happening this afternoon. But I just want to thank all our panel, what legends each one and every one of them are, and how treasured we are to hear them. And thank you very, very much.
All right.
Would you hate me if I asked you to sing a song? Sorry? Would you
Thank you,
hate me
Ginny.
if I asked- Oh,
Folks,
could you just,
there's a-
no, just wait 1 minute. We're just going to impinge on Professor Ian Lowe. He has a legend about finishing things with a song. So I've just said, would you kill me if I asked you to sing one? And he said no.
One year at Woodford, I ran out of material, and to pad out the session, I sang Bob Dylan's "The Times They Are A-Changing." And I argued, and would argue now, that it's more appropriate now than when he sang it. Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you'd better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing. Come, writers and critics who prophesy with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing. Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorways, don't block up the hall, for he who gets hurt will be he who has stall. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing. Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly changing. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the times they are a-changing. The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast, and the present now will soon be the past, and the slow one now will later be fast. The order is rapidly changing, and ask for the times they are a-changing.